First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Historic Landmarks Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject that's within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled on today's agenda for a public discussion. Anyone? No? I will close public comment and move to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of April 25th. And the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History workshop meeting of February 29th.
In one motion?
No, 2 motions? Okay. So first motion.
Second the meeting of the 25th.
Very good. We have a first and a second. Boucher, Sharp. Under discussion, any changes, corrections, or clarifications to the minutes of April 29th? 25th. None? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Next is approval of the minutes of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History workshop meeting day on February 29th.
Second.
Motion by Boucher, second by Sharp. Under discussion, any additions, corrections, or clarifications? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the consent calendar. Ms. Gantz.
Mr. Chair, item A, 100 block of West Cabrillo Boulevard was project design approval and final approval with conditions. And item B, 125 East De La Guerra Street was project design approval and final approval with conditions. And those were reviewed by Chair Suding.
Yes, Commissioner Arias, under discussion.
Do we get the text of what's on these
Plaques.
plaques?
Yes, I did read the text that was on.
But does the committee get the entire task force get to read the plaque?
It was just left up to the consent calendar reviewer. Any other questions? Okay, look for a motion to ratify the consent calendar. Are you okay, Ms. Arias?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
I guess the question was, the text is vetted, I mean, it was done by
Basically, Commissioner Murray and Commissioner Arias, I reviewed it for any misrepresentation of the circle or of the city of Santa Barbara. They are doing something that's a little bit different than what we've ever done before, and they are putting a telephone number on the plaque that allows a user to call the number and hear an explanation of the plaque, stories, as well as songs. They originally wanted to do one of those QR codes that you scan with your smartphone, but I didn't feel that that was appropriate or in the best interest of the plaque, because it has to be black and white, and they were going to insert a high-pressure laminated QR code onto the plaque, and I didn't feel that that was appropriate. So that's how I reviewed the plaque. Yes.
The plaque is something that's going to be there. Probably when they don't even have cell phones, we have something else.
Yeah,
And so
I felt that, I thought about that, and the QR code is certainly more of a fad than anything else, I think, and not everybody has a smartphone that can scan those QR codes in the first place, but I felt that telephones would be around for a lot longer than the QR, the QR code. So in any case, that's the hat I wore sort of when I was reviewing the text, and I didn't find anything that misrepresented the circle or the city of Santa Barbara. Yes, Commissioner Rios.
Since we do not have a historic faculty staff member,
Urban historian.
yeah, were you satisfied that it was adequate? It was accurate?
Yes. It was a very, very simple text, and rather general, saying that they existed here, that sort of thing. I can't remember the exact language, but yes, I did find it satisfactory. Anybody else? Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to ratify the consent calendar.
I'll do it. I'll make that motion, but we only have 4 of us here.
And we have to table the agenda until Commissioner Arias returns. So we are in recess.
Sorry for bringing it up.
I was afraid you weren't going to know. I was afraid you weren't going to bring it up. And looking for ratification of the consent calendar.
I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Boucher and made the motion, and Commissioner Sharp seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals. Ms. Gantz.
Mr. Chair, just to announce that Commissioners Drury, Lavoie, and, yeah, I forgot to change my sheet, Schallenberger are absent today. And then Mr. Berman has some announcements.
Chair, serving members of the Commission, a few weeks ago there was a Phase 1 archaeological report brought before the board, and the board chose to apply additional conditions over and above what the consultant had proposed. Prompted me to do a little research and to determine what the proper role of the HLC is, what the rules of the game are, try to spell them out in a memorandum which I've given them to you right now. We're concerned that adding mitigation measures or conditions of approval to a project without a connection between an impact and the project, first of all, is not consistent with CEQA, and second, or the MEA for that matter, but also exposes the city to some liability because it's a taking. You can't just require things willy-nilly. There has to be a nexus between the project impacts and the mitigation measures. It would be more appropriate. Oh, you know, a little summary of what's in this memorandum. These Phase 1 archaeological reports are prepared by consultants that are vetted on a list of approved consultants. In the MEA is the guidance that staff uses to determine if an archaeologist is properly qualified. They have to have an advanced degree in archaeology. They have to have experience, substantial experience in the area of Santa Barbara, in Chumash archaeology. These reports are then prepared by these experts, are then sent to UCSB, our archaeological advisor, who is Dr. Glassow. He's a professor of archaeology. He has a huge amount of experience in Chumash archaeology, as well as being a former one of the foremost experts in Chumash archaeology. These professionals are very protective of archaeological resources, and in addition, the reports are reviewed by the environmental analyst who has experience with archaeology reports as well. And that review ensures that there's substantial data in these reports, and that the conclusions reached in the reports are supported by that substantial data. Those are CEQA requirements we're trying to comply with. If there's an issue with the data brought up by just somebody who isn't an expert, it doesn't rise to the level of something that is a fact that we can base new stuff on. We are limited in the extent to which the facts can be altered. The facts can only be altered if somebody introduces new factual evidence or an expert provides an expert opinion. So with that, I'm trying to provide some guidance that basically says that in these circumstances, if you question the conclusions of a report, rather bring it up with the environmental analyst, and we can discuss whether it would be appropriate to make a change instead of directing the consultant to go ahead and make a change to the report at the hearing. And then we could continue the item to a future date. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, so I have 3 questions so far. Do we need then to reconsider item number 1 on April 25th?
We cannot consider it at this hearing.
It's too late, right?
It's too late. We found a way of wording it to meet your requirements, so that it's the consultant's not saying the board. He's saying it so that the board said this and added to the report. So
Okay, but we've already accepted the minutes as presented, so we need to reopen that.
we could do that if you so
Then,
please. Yeah.
Because otherwise, everybody here is under the impression that the motion for item 1 is as read in the draft minutes. Nobody spoke up when that came up. Second part of the question that I have is, because this area is sensitive and there are known factual remnants, that seems to me to be a nexus for requiring monitoring during excavation.
As I tried to explain in the prior hearing, saying that there are known archaeological resources in that area, the issue isn't whether there may be something in the area, it's whether there's a high probability of something being in the area.
Okay.
According to the survey, the literature search, the archaeologist's opinion, there are no archaeological resources in the site. That doesn't mean they're impossible, that it's impossible to find them. It means that the probability of finding them is low.
Okay. There was another resident in the area who came to our meeting 2 weeks ago, and I don't recall reviewing that archaeological report, but she indicated that she had to have monitoring during any excavation. Is that different than what is happening with this project? I don't know, because I don't recall the archaeology report for her project.
Neither do I, to be honest. We did discuss it afterwards, and I don't remember the details, but it's not the same issue. There was some reason to suspect there were archaeological resources there. I recall. Sorry, I just remembered. They had found something on the site, and therefore they thought an arrowhead, correct.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
that led them to
That
believe there
triggered
was a
the
possibility, a higher probability that there's something else on the site.
Then the third and last part, hopefully, is why does the HLC even then have to accept the report if we have the expert accepting it? I mean, it seems like archaeology reports are better left to the experts. I don't mind doing it. I just, if we don't even have any sort of...
well, you do. You have some say.
If something comes up.
You can question us, but what we're saying is a difference between saying to the environmental analyst, we suspect that this fact is incorrect.
Then telling
or
the applicant.
Then telling the applicant
Okay.
to go ahead and change the report.
Okay.
Yeah.
We did say that the report shall be amended to include monitoring during excavation.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
One of the concerns I had was that there were no specific dimensions or volume capacity on this drainage ditch, which could affect not only the extent of the excavation, but also downstream water flow. And that was the basis for my opposing it, because I felt we were in a very sensitive area, and that changes in this drainage ditch could result in damage or affecting things downstream and all. And if we are going to get an archaeological report, we should get facts as to what the dimensions of the ditch is going to be, what the volume of the drainage is, and things like this. And that was missing. And that's an important part that can affect future areas downstream.
Chair Sodding, members of the Commission,
Mr. Berman.
the volume of the hydrology is irrelevant to the archaeology. The amount of excavation and the extent of excavation is highly relevant to the evaluation, and it was anticipated by David Stone. He had the plan for the project in his report. He had a project description of what it would entail, and so that I believe that report is adequate in that regard. But the hydrology is not. It's not an issue in this report. This is about archaeology, not hydrology.
I'm sorry, but I have to respectfully disagree with you, because I have a minor in archaeology, and I know downstream flows can do damage to archaeological sites.
Okay. Thank you. Then I guess we need to reopen approval of the minutes of April 25th.
I make a motion to
Reopen.
go to reopen.
Okay, we have a motion to reopen. Second.
I'll second.
Sharp.
Yes.
Okay, so if you make a...
Chair Sooding, those are the minutes from the hearing. I don't think it's appropriate to reopen those minutes. What we could do instead would be to come back at a later date with the report, and we can change your direction that was given at the earlier hearing. Those are the minutes from the hearing. You can't now change them.
You can't change those.
We can only amend it and then
Okay. Then scratch that, and I'll close the approval of the minutes then. Okay. Any other announcements?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Subcommittee reports? Anyone?
we had a subcommittee report scheduled for this morning, but it was canceled.
Well, thank you for that. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Winnick.
Okay, actually, I could report on. It seems like there were two things. Oh, there are two things, both at the airport. One, I attended along with, Commissioner Reyes is also, the ABR meeting where they reviewed the Marine Memorial that's at the airport, and that got overall a pretty warm reception. The biggest concern that they seemed to have at ABR was about the siting of it and the effect on landscape, and so that was probably where the most discussion was on the item. And it will be coming up at Planning Commission, so if people want to follow it, that would be the next place to see. And I think at ABR, it was still just conceptual review. It was not a final. And then we also met out at the airport, and Chair Sooding was part of that, as well as Michael Drury, I'm trying to remember, and Commissioner Reyes as well, where we...
No, Commissioner Murray.
Murray, I'm sorry. I'm getting you guys confused. Excuse me. And we reviewed the mock-ups that they had out there of the plaster. Basically, the issue out there being on the building that's been relocated, they're removing all the plaster, and they were giving us examples of what the plaster would look like, the paint color, and things like that. I think we were all in agreement that the plaster work needed more refinement in order to make it match the existing plaster work, and we basically asked them to be very careful about not removing too much of the old structure, to keep examples of each different kind of profile in order to then be able to go back out and match that to it. And they're supposed to be inviting us back out there to review how well they're matching it.
And if I just may chime in,
Please
the majority of the issue was at the column capital and the column base. It had to do with the OG radius, and then there was a little bit of concern at the top of the wall where it meets the eave, the cornice. Thank you. I couldn't think of that word. Also, we reviewed the step tile and riser material, and we took no exception to that. We approved that, basically. Up to the tower.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Sure.
inquire? I didn't get a chance to go out and look at it myself, but I did have two questions with respect to the use of a weep screed. They plan to use one. That sometimes is introduced as a code requirement on new buildings. And if you have an objection to that, this would be the time to say that.
We did object to it at the site, and they could not produce the detail for that at that time, so they were going to do research on that. We made it clear that we didn't want to have a weep screed, if at all
Right.
possible, particularly where the wall stucco meets a horizontal plane of hardscape, like a sidewalk or such. In the landscape area, it's not that big of a concern because it can be screened by plant material, hidden by plant material, but we've made it pretty clear that we did not want to see that, but
Right.
they did not have a detail for it.
And they were going to bring the detail here to the next time they present.
And I assume that, I don't know if we conditioned it without the control joints.
Yes, we
Okay,
did.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Minor, yeah.
That's good. I'm done.
Okay. I have one. I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting of May 3rd, and their meetings are early. They meet at 8:30, so we're lucky. Anyhow, there were two items on the agenda that I thought interested the Historic Landmarks Commission, and that was the consideration of additional species in the 0 to 100 blocks of Kimberly Avenue. There are design issues that are creating a delay in Stack's decision, but they side with a larger tree well on the east side of Kimberly. If you recall, the east side of Kimberly, I think, had a 9-foot sidewalk, and we were trying to, wiggle some more landscape out of that, and they had a concern about that too. So just want everybody to pay attention when the bridge project comes back that we need to look at Kimberly Avenue. Then the next item that I thought would have been of interest is the the 0 block of West Mason Street, and that's to change the street tree designation. The members of the Street Tree Advisory Committee are to come up with a list of trees. So far, they're considering jacaranda, melaleuca, I believe, metrosideros, and one other one, magnolia. They also, when we review the Entrada project, they would like to see the tree wells in that area lengthened as long as possible, or as big as possible, rather than just a 4-foot or a 5-foot square. So when you review that project, you'll be looking at that, hopefully, and can follow the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation for that. That's it for
Mr. Chair?
me. Yes, Commissioner Rios.
Have you had any input on the replacement of the tree, the stone pine?
I didn't know.
It's
Why?
been,
Sorry.
it has been this is the third meeting that we have requested when that replacement is going to be done. Anapamu and Garden, and I would like to know when it's going to be done.
Okay. I believe staff, I would be happy to do that. Since I sort of dropped the ball, I should have asked at that May 3rd commission or committee meeting. I didn't. But if staff could give Mr. Downey a call and find that out for us, that would be more appropriate than me calling him.
Thank you.
Okay. No other subcommittee reports, then we'll go on to the discussion item. We are 5 minutes behind. We have a presentation by the city attorney on Fair Political Practices Commission, conflict of interest rules applicable to design review board members. And we have Steve Wiley, city attorney.
You don't have to read it now.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the HLC.
Welcome, Mr. Riley.
No, you don't have to read these materials now, because there's a lot here, and some of it's fairly dense. You'll see one of the 7 items, 2 of the 7 items I've distributed are memos from the city attorney's office that have been sent to the HLC in prior years. So you may have seen these in the past. But, for example, the number 6, the June 2011 memo to you, which is actually, I think, a revised memo, been revised a few times. That's just its most recent issuance date. Has a lot of things attached to it. For example, sample opinion letters from the Fair Political Practices Commission. And when I say this is fairly dense, that's kind of what I'm referring to. It's tough to follow. So in beginning, let me say that in recent months, you may be aware that a former ABR member was disciplined or was fined by the Fair Political Practices Commission for apparently having a conflict of interest and then not doing what he was supposed to do when you have a conflict of interest. And it made quite a few of us realize that we could probably do more in terms of advising city boards and commissions about potential conflicts of interest, and in particular, what to do when you think you have a conflict of interest. And, one of the reasons I've distributed all these materials is to allow you to read them at your leisure and to get back to me or to Scott Vincent, who is really, other than me, the person in the city attorney's office designated to try to help with conflict questions. But to read these materials, to try to get a sense of what is required, but not necessarily become an expert in it or understand it all, because I'll tell you, I don't feel that I understand it all. It's very complex, but hopefully in reviewing these materials, you'll be able to do what lawyers call issue spotting. You'll have enough knowledge to know, what, it occurs to me that maybe when an application for project right next door to my business location, my business property comes in, maybe it occurred to me to think, do I have a conflict of interest? Or at least what the law considers a conflict of interest, such that I should consult with the city attorney's office. Not necessarily that you answer the question yourself and, take action all by yourself. And only that I want to encourage all of you to try to spot these issues and then to give me a call or Scott Vincent a call or send us an email. And what we will try to do is articulate the question and then try to get an answer from the FPPC. And that's another thing about these letters that you'll see attached to Scott's memo. These are what are called informal opinion letters. And this is part of a process that the FPPC makes available to help people with questions like this. Now, they have a phone advice line, and I think in recent years it's only operable like 20 hours a week, and it's busy a lot. And more importantly, I think when you get someone on the line and you explain the problem to you, they qualify their answer so much because it's a they just, and I understand this, and this makes sense. They say, well, I don't know all of the circumstances, and assuming what you've said is true about this and what you've said of this is true, this may be the case. They never give you a direct answer. As I say, I understand why that's the case. When we maybe assist you in asking for a written informal opinion letter, and we help you prepare a letter asking for that, it'll be much more precise, and I think the answer will be much more clear to you and more helpful to you if and when this comes up. I can get into today. I know you're running a little late, and I think we only had about 15 minutes for this agenda.
Actually, I believe you have until 2:15 if you need it.
I certainly would like to answer any specific questions you have, so feel free to interrupt me with anything specific. I'd much rather address, something that's on your mind lately than just go through what I have, thought I'd prepare. But one thing I do want to mention is that these conflict questions really are, the rubber meets the road for the design review bodies. HLC, ABR, SFDB, lesser extent, I think, for them just by the nature of their jurisdiction, and then the Planning Commission. And I say the Planning Commission fourth because they certainly can have conflicts. You'll see a lot of these situations deal with planning commissioners, but architects, engineers, landscape architects, landscape designers, people who are typically on our design boards, they're out there trying to make a living in Santa Barbara, which is not like the Southern California area, not the LA area, trying to make a living in this community, and it wouldn't be unusual for you to represent someone that is also needs to appear before a city design review board. So I'm starting with the design review boards and making this presentation. I'm going to go on to the Planning Commission, go on to some of the other commissions, Harbor, Airport, that make, frankly, they have some fairly serious jurisdiction for the city. Most of it advisory jurisdiction, but the fact that it's merely advisory doesn't mean that there can't be a conflict. And then eventually I'll get to advising the Library Commission. I'm not sure they have too many conflicts of interest, but, So, I think from these memos, the two memos from our office, one of the things that often comes into play for design review board is what's called the technical documents exception and the sole proprietor exception.
Yeah. Is there a difference between sole proprietor and sole practitioner?
No.
Okay.
I think it's just the proprietor, I think, is more of a word that you'll find in state law,
Right.
precisely defined, but I think that they both
Type of
mean the
business
same
for
thing.
tax reasons is
Yeah.
usually sole proprietor. In this document, I see both sole proprietor and sole practitioner, so
Right.
I'm wondering if
Yeah.
there is a difference.
But it prompts me to mention you can be a sole proprietor and still have employees,
That's
a receptionist or even a draftsperson. the way it's used here by the FPPC is really referring to a licensed type of professional.
Okay.
And
So I shouldn't encourage my employee to get a license now.
yeah, if
Well, maybe they present well.
Yeah.
yeah. So you know, for example, if you had, I have a person who answers the phone for me and does typing and filing, and there's that person and me, you can still be a sole proprietor. You know,
Okay.
you're-
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
And well, let's talk about the sole proprietor exception. It's a narrow exception, and it actually originated in Santa Barbara when the city attorney's office in the 1980s. I can't remember if it was HLC or ABR that was concerned about. Well, I'm a sole proprietor. I want to be on the city's ABR, but it's really going to restrict my ability to do business in this town if I can't even present to the ABR or the HLC, or I can't prepare documents and submit them. And so the city attorney's office asked the FPPC for a ruling on this, and we sort of pressed it, and it resulted in a regulation that really wasn't everything we had hoped for back then, I know. And that's why I say it's a narrow exception, because we had hoped that at least the sole proprietor could make their own presentation to their own board or to another city board, and it doesn't allow that. What the sole proprietor exception does is allow you to prepare the documents, to do the drawings, and to answer questions about the drawings. And that's all. And then, well, the question would be, well, who's going to present my client's, project to the board? And unfortunately, and this is where I say we didn't get as much as we had hoped from the FPPC, the answer from them is some other consultant working for your client. Maybe a land use planner or land use firm would make the presentation, and you would sit back there, and only because, in case somebody has a question about one of the documents, what's the scale on the drawing, or do you have a roof plan drawing, and the answer would be yes or no.
Could they ask, what was your intention? Could they ask that?
Well,
Could you answer?
good question, because when you look at these things, what the FPPC is saying, you can prepare the documents and you can answer questions about the documents, but you can't advocate on behalf of your client. And I think part of the problem is the people at the FPPC they're lawyers or maybe staff people. They don't understand that you wouldn't call what you do, I think, possibly. You might not call what you do for a client advocacy. That's something a lawyer would say. You're advocating for your client when you present for your client. When, an architect, say, sits here and walks you through the project. And, but it's not uncommon to, put a positive spin on a project. And for the architect to do that, and they would consider that advocating for your client. So
I get
that's the line they're trying to draw. Is it real black and white? I don't think so. So my answer is, if you really want to be on the safe side, let the board, in this case the HLC, ask the questions of you and only answer the question. And it should be like a technical question. Is there a more recent iteration of this drawing, or what's the scale, that sort of thing, and definitely not sit up here and present.
So you're saying that even as a sole proprietor, I cannot present to this commission?
That's correct. Yeah.
Huh.
So let me ask a question. So say one is has a firm, and they're allowed to have one of their staff members present, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well.
And they would also be, because that's what I read there too.
Yeah.
So you would think that, I guess I have a problem with this too. I mean, I do have staff that presumably could come and present, but I would still think that if you're, let's be honest, if you sit in front of the board and you're talking about your project, your objective for being there is, in fact, to advocate for the project, to have it get approval. That's why you're sitting there. You're not coming here to say, hey, I hope you don't like the project. Let's shoot it down and send it away. I mean, you're here to advocate, but respectfully. So I guess I just don't understand why that process still isn't allowed in that one instance.
It's because the FPPC says so. And yeah, and what if you think about where they're coming from, and I'll tell you, I've seen this in particular recently. For example, people file complaints with the FPPC that so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that, and within days there will be a headline, so-and-so under investigation by the FPPC. And so one thing, they initiate an investigation every time they get a complaint because they consider a phone call or an email to you saying, what's your side of the story, and then initiating an investigation. So I just want you to be aware of that. Number two, it brings up this headline test of, from my perspective, particularly now, I would rather err on the side of being cautious with you and telling you where I think you're going to be entirely safe and cannot be even accused of a FPPC violation, a Political Reform Act violation, and where the FPPC would agree and where no one would really even feel like they had to lodge a complaint. And that's where I say being out there and letting someone else present is the safest course. And only in preparing the documents, which I think is it's good that you can still prepare the documents, and answer questions about the documents is good. But and unfortunately, this may mean that a client would have to advocate for their own project, or like they say, they'd have to retain a land use consultant or someone like that.
This is somewhat of a rhetorical question, but how do you expect to attract qualified people to this commission or any other commission when they are inhibited by what they can do?
It's tough, but I don't think you mean me. I think you mean the FPPC.
Well,
because that's exactly what we pose to them when.
Or how do you intend to retain people that are on this on a commission? I mean,
yeah.
You don't know what's going through my head right now, but I bet you could guess.
No, that's right, and that's why it's important for me to be frank with you. I didn't write these regulations.
I know.
And when we raised this question with the FPPC in the 80s, we said, do you understand a community the size of Santa Barbara only has so many design professionals? And we feel very strongly about design review in this community. And there's a real tension here, and if you make it too restrictive, design professionals won't want to be on our boards.
They can't be on the board.
We flat out said that to them, and this is the answer we got. All right, we'll give you the sole proprietor exception.
But even that's restrictive.
It is.
I mean, it's a very narrow, what did you say, narrow exception. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, yeah. That's very unfortunate.
But and it really prompts me to give you to let the other shoe drop.
Oh, thanks.
And this had more to do with the recent situation. It's often people think that all I need to do is step down. All I need to do is at the day of the hearing tell the chair, I'm going to step down on this item and leave the room.
But we don't have to leave the room now. I mean.
Well, yeah.
Okay. I'll let you finish.
A conflict generally. Let's say. You're not well. Just say a conflict generally, and it's more than simply stepping down. It's if you have a conflict, you cannot be contacting staff and advocating for the project, and that's by phone, and that's by email, and that's in the hallway, and fellow commissioners, same thing. Outside of this room, a week before the hearing, you can't call a fellow commissioner and say, I'm working for so-and-so and I'm conflicted off, but I'd like to tell you about that project. Can't do that. And that's sort of related to my caution to you. The safest course in the sole proprietor exception, when you have prepared the documents, is to be responsive and not proactive, to not affirmatively call people or email people, because it can easily slide into what someone would characterize as advocacy. And when the former ABR commissioner was fined, for whatever reason, he apparently did not seem to understand that it's more than simply abstaining. You cannot contact staff or fellow board members and lobby for a client. So.
I have a question,
Oh, sorry.
but it's on a
Commissioner, yes?
different subject. It's on a different
Does
subject.
it have to do with hydrology?
Go ahead, Commissioner. I'll follow afterwards.
The staff was very gracious and gave us areas 500 feet around our property that we had conflict of interest, et cetera. If you have a project, say you're up in the Riviera or something like that, and you have the 500 feet distance, but there is one road down, and that is traffic impacted, and this is a major project, say something like that, even though it's beyond the 500 feet, do you have a conflict of interest for recognizing impacts outside that affect your area but are without the 500 feet?
Maybe.
Oh, there's the good one.
Yeah. No, I have to tell you, we use the 500-foot rule now. It actually used to be in the regulations. It's not there anymore. We use it as a shorthand way of issue spotting. And we also use 1,000 feet. And again, it's just issue spotting. And here we're, of course, just talking about the real estate conflict. And this would be your home, any business property that you own, any real property that you own. But it also includes if you rent, even if you rent a home. And so it's an applicant in proximity, let's say your home. 500 feet, if it's within 500 feet, the FPP staff is going to presume you've got a conflict. And it doesn't even matter if the home is 498 feet away and all they're in front of, this wouldn't be, let's say it's a business property, and the only reason they're here is they're going to change the color of the building. And you think, how could that affect my financial interests? They're 490 feet away, and all they're doing is changing the color from off-white to white.
It's just a pretty black and
Yeah,
white.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's like,
Rule.
be on safe side. If they're within 500 feet, abstain, step down, do not participate. Then the next analysis, or the way you approach it, is, what if they're between 500 and 1,000 feet? And that's the answer is, it depends. If, let's say it's your home and someone is proposing, this is far-fetched, but a 7-Eleven, 600 feet from your home, they want to rezone and this and that. And it's like 600 feet, and all of a sudden a quiet residential neighborhood is going to a quasi-commercial use. Well, I would think most people would say, yeah, there's a real potential that a 7-Eleven within 600 feet of your home could affect your home's property values. So even though it's 600 feet, you should still step down. Mm-hmm. At 1,000 feet, the presumption sort of turns around, and there's a presumption that you have no conflict of interest, but you could. Actually, it could be 4,000 feet away, and if it's a slaughterhouse and it's your home that someone wants to build, you could have a conflict of interest, because the question is, could it affect your property values either positively or negatively, and even as little as $5, then you have a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Great. So I have a question going back sort of to that other issue of interaction with city agencies. So, for instance, some of the staff that we have that we enjoy support us here at HLC also support other agencies, like, for instance, ABR. Right. So say, for instance, I have something that's in front of ABR. It's not an HLC item, but I'm interacting with staff that I interact with on, that I usually interact with for HLC. Where does that get to where it starts being perceived as a conflict of interest?
That's a good question, because that could easily come up. And yeah, so you're not on ABR. You can present to ABR. But let's say it's shared staff, and you just happen, you're here and you happen to be, you shouldn't talk about that project to that shared staff.
No,
So I'm not worried about that project.
Yeah.
I'm going to step down from, let's say. What I'm concerned about is the fact that I'd be, say, advocating with ABR strongly for some other project unrelated to the one, but it's the same staff. That's what I'm concerned about. Is there any conflict there?
Is ABR...
Not in the hearing itself. So it would be clear that you could present to ABR, and the FPPC actually, their rule says, you can present to any board for which your board does not have budgetary control.
Okay.
Well, you know how the city works. You have no budgetary control over ABR. So you can present to ABR, and while you're presenting to ABR, if there's shared staff there, that's not going to be a problem. I don't see
Okay,
that as
good.
anything. But you couldn't then, 2 days later, talk to that staff person about your project. You know.
Well, that's what I want to know. I could talk to them about the project in front of ABR. I just can't talk to them relative to the project in front of HLC.
Right.
That's fine.
You couldn't advocate that.
Okay, that's fine.
We're at 2:15, so we've got to move on to the next item. You certainly have opened my eyes, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, like I say, I hope this is just the opening contact that you're comfortable calling me or something.
You're going to get a call from me. We're going to be talking to each other, I think, so thank you.
Okay, no resignations there.
I have no choice. You know, I don't. Yeah. Next item on the agenda is a discussion item, and this is the overview of the proposed financial plan for fiscal year 2013. And we have Betty Weiss, but we don't have Betty Weiss.
Plastic surgery.
No.
It is Santa Barbara after all.
Okay, if you could introduce yourself and give us a brief presentation. You have until 2:35.
Okay. Good afternoon, HLC members. My name is Sue Gray, and I'm the Administrative Services Manager in the Community Development Department. And Betty Weiss normally comes to present the budget to all the commissions and boards once a year. She's on vacation today. She's in Mexico fishing, sport fishing, having a good time.
I'm sure she's watching us.
Or she will be later. So I told her I would come and present it to you. Basically, our fiscal year 13 budget is the second year of a 2-year budget cycle. Last year, the city council approved the fiscal year 12 and a fiscal year 13 budget. We normally do a 2-year planning cycle. So the council is really focusing this year on the changes between the originally proposed fiscal year 13 budget and what we're recommending now, the changes between the two. It's supposed to be a simple budget, easy for us, supposed to be my easiest budget year. However, in the middle of all of that, our redevelopment agency, as you probably know, has been dissolved, and it's had quite an impact on our department. So a lot of the changes have to do with the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. Overall revenues citywide are better than expected when the first 2013 budget was approved. At that time, there was an estimated $2.7 million deficit. Now it looks like it's closer to $800,000, and that's expected to be covered by one-time measures. So the city there are no proposed furloughs in this budget. As you'll recall, in the last several years, mandatory furloughs helped to balance the budgets. So this is just an organizational chart for the whole department, and you can see where it says RDA Successor Agency. That used to be the RDA program, and it's gone from six full-time employees now to 0.75, and that's just to help with the dissolution of the agency, and it will eventually go away totally. Overall, we have 14 programs and 7 funds. This shows the proposed budget for the entire department. So this includes all of the funds. General fund, as you can see, is $9.3 million. RDA is $9.1. The majority of that, $8 million something thousand, is to pay back the bonds, which we have to do until they are paid off. The other ones are smaller grant type funding that we receive. This shows our positions department-wide. In fiscal year 10, we had 78.6 full-time employees. For proposed fiscal year 13, that's gone down to 66.35. Again, a lot of those between fiscal year 12 and 13 have to do with the redevelopment agency. This just shows the general fund programs. So these are just the programs we have in the department that are funded through the general fund. These are our appropriations for the general fund. You can see planning is the biggest part of the pie on here, 48%, followed by building and safety at 31%. Our total budget is projected to be $9.353 million. This chart shows the fiscal year 11 actual for general fund only for our department, the 12 adopted, 12 projected, and then what we're recommending in 13. And it's gone down from adopted of 10 million down to 9.3. That's the majority of that is because the redevelopment agency staff, they are general fund employees, and then they were reimbursed by the redevelopment agency. So $1 million, we were reduced by $1 million just from those costs.
Why do supplies go up so much? Supplies and services, do those independent contractors?
Go up,
It goes from 347 to 550.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to look that one up. I know that we budget usually more than we spend. We usually have savings during the year. So that's an actual compared to a proposed budget. So. These are revenues for general fund only. As you can see, most of our revenues in this department come from fees and charges, building and safety, and planning. Those are going up a little bit from the adopted, but they're actually, you'll see in a later slide, they are being reduced from what we originally projected for fiscal year 13. Now these slides show the 12 projected, the original 2013 plan, the difference, and then what's recommended now. So under fees and charges, you can see under planning, we're estimating to come in almost 100,000 short of what we originally thought we would get in fiscal year 13 for planning fees. The interfund reimbursements at 1.3 million, that's the amount that we reimburse. We were reimbursed from the redevelopment agency for their salaries. These are the expenditures for the same projected. You can see salaries and benefits went down. Again, those RDA staff. Supplies and services were reduced. That's due to Plan Santa Barbara. We had a special budget, a special fund set up for them, and that's being eliminated next year. So that it's a different fund, but it was still a general fund source. Allocated costs are going up for the general fund, and that's the portion of the overhead allocation that, or the allocated costs that were allocated to the redevelopment agency that our department still has to pay for. So that's going up a little bit. The one that says grants, arts and human services, that number is primarily the money that we give away to the arts organizations and human services. There's a little bit in there for special projects, and that extra 10,000, the adjustment. Plan Santa Barbara, its fund is going away, but we put in a little bit extra in the long-range planning budget to help implement Plan Santa Barbara. Let's see, we talked about those. Changes to fees. Every year we look at our fee resolution and decide whether we should increase our fees. And consistent with our original plan for 2013 in planning, we're projecting to increase them by 5% in most line items. We're not projecting any increases for zoning information reports, conditional use permits, general plan amendments, or sign review. And the planning staff also did a reevaluation of the annexation and mailing list service with this fee schedule. Building and safety is similar, a 5% increase in most line items, and they reevaluated their fee tables for new construction, tenant improvements, and shell buildings. These are the key budget changes, the impacts from RDA. We had two our redevelopment agency specialists who are returning to planning as project planners. One is filling a vacancy, an associate planner vacancy. The other one is going to be a very temporary overfill into the planning division. We are currently already down 0.5 of a position, so really it's only a 0.5 overfill at this point, and we expect that other half-time position to go away soon, and we won't be recruiting for the loss of it until it's evened out. There was also 0.5 of two different planners that were paid out of the redevelopment agency housing budget to help with housing-related issues. Those are going back into planning, being absorbed in planning. And then there was a little bit for the assistant city administrator and 0.4 FTE of our graphic artists that was paid by RDA that now are going back into the general fund. And a division manager position was changed to add to the duties and take on the remaining housing and human services staff. So those are the key RDA impacts. We also had a few other changes. In building and safety, we had a vacant building inspector aide position that's being eliminated. We had originally projected to have our 0.5 building inspector who's been working in water resources during the past few years to help with the budget. We had projected for him to come back full-time to community development, but that's not going to happen at this point. Plan Santa Barbara, as I mentioned earlier, was phased out. We eliminated all the expenditures in that budget. All the revenues that are generated will go to pay back the general fund for the Plan Santa Barbara expenses. And then I mentioned earlier the $10,000 that was added to the long-range planning budget. And then another change is we are proposing $40,162 in general fund monies to support the Rental Housing Mediation Task Force program. That's not been funded historically by general fund. So this is a new thing. And the P3s, they're striving to maintain levels of service for enforcement, counter, and plan check. With the staffing reductions over the past several years, they've had a little bit of trouble keeping up with zoning enforcement. The sign committee hasn't been able to be staffed for a couple of years, I guess, and there was one more. There was, the stipends, since you guys are commission members. The stipends did not come back this year for commission members. They're going to be working on the first phase implementation of Plan Santa Barbara, Historic Resources Work Program, and continuing on the land development team process improvements. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Just have a question. How does the budget work with hiring an urban historian? I'm hoping that that's not getting cut from the budget. We've been, I guess, promised that we're going to get one.
Yes.
Let us know now if we aren't.
No, that is still in the budget. You're good with that position.
Okay.
They're just at the very last leg of the recruitment process, and that person should be on shortly.
Okay.
1 month.
What was that last one, land?
The land development team process improvements.
The land development team is kind of a collaboration and cooperation among community development, building and safety, public works, and the fire department on the way that the whole permit process works citywide, and trying to make it easier for the public to get through.
Another question I had, the Plan Santa Barbara has been phased out, so those are eliminated expenditures. But if I look at this as sort of a balance sheet, then I see that on the other side of the balance sheet, we have the first phase implementation of Plan SB. So how do those two compare expenditure-wise?
We had originally proposed for fiscal year 13, $25,000 in the Plan Santa Barbara budget to begin implementation.
Okay.
That's the part that was phased out. But we've added $10,000 into the long-range planning budget, and the long-range planning staff will be the ones to do the implementation of Plan Santa Barbara. So the actual development of the plan, that part has been completed.
Okay, and there's basically $25,000 still left for that.
15.
for
10,000 is what we've put in the budget. There was
There's 15
originally
left.
25,000.
right,
but
and
this
so if you're using 10, there's 15 left over.
It's not really left over.
Okay. Dried up.
It's just
Went
less
poof.
that we have to pay back.
Poof. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to cost 25, now it costs 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Mr. Rios.
The bottom line is, how much is left in the reserve for emergency problems in the city?
Citywide?
Yes, citywide.
I'm not sure of that number. Do you?
Good afternoon, Paul Casey. Ms. Arias, I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think for the general fund, we still have all of our emergency reserves, but the budget reserve is not fully funded towards the policy amount. And so that's something that the City Council and the Finance Committee in particular have been talking about, how to rebuild the budget policy reserves back to their fully
Thank you.
policy amount. And also, I might mention on the urban historian, that's the first position we've filled, I think, in over 3 years. All other vacancies have been eliminated over time due to this budget. And that was one that we fought for because we knew how important it was to you all and to the community. And so we were thankful that we had the authority to go ahead and fill that, and that person should be on within a month.
Great.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
just a point of information, which dates me, unfortunately. The commissioners originally received $1 a year, which enabled them to take the expenses of being on a commission off as a business expense on their taxes. Later on, the fees went up to $50, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any possibility that they could consider paying $1 a year for the purpose of making it more tax-friendly for the people, particularly the business people who serve on these commissions and boards?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, to be honest, that's the first I've heard that would
Yeah,
be
I
something
originated
beneficial. So
Back in 1812.
Yeah.
I thought
I
it was
mean,
17.
that's something we can think about, and we should follow up about doing that.
$1 a year enables business people to
To
take
write
this
off.
off as a business expense.
So the time
If
that
you
it-
try to take it off as a charitable
Can't.
act, you will probably be audited by the IRS. But for $1 a year, we can take it off as a business expense. And it makes a big difference in people who are professionals that donate their time.
Huge.
So I would ask that you seriously consider it. It's a minor expense, but it makes a difference on people's taxes.
We want those in crisp dollar bills.
And do we get back pay? Yeah. Unmarked. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gray. Thank you, Mr. Casey. And we will move on to the next item. I'm assuming there were no more questions. Next item is item number 1. This is Cabrillo Boulevard at various locations. This is a proposal to install pedestrian-activated flashing lights at 3 intersections to improve the safety of pedestrians crossing the street. Yes.
Down Cabrillo Boulevard on a Sunday afternoon, see all the people ignoring the crosswalks.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
Okay, if you could introduce yourself for the record and give a brief presentation. You have until 3:05.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Bailey, and I'm with the city's traffic engineering group.
Welcome.
Thank you. Does anybody need a memo?
No.
Good bedtime reading, though.
The city's traffic engineering group is going through a review citywide of all.
Excuse me 1 minute. Ms. Feliciano, could you switch the projector, please? Sorry. I want everybody in the audience to be able to see. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Bailey.
City's traffic engineering group is going through a review of all uncontrolled crossings citywide. The idea is that we're trying to identify the high-risk pedestrian crossing locations, and a few locations along Cabrillo Boulevard have risen to the top, those being Cabrillo and Bath Street, Cabrillo and Chapala, and Cabrillo and Corona del Mar. Another location, Cabrillo and Anacapa, is also under study right now, but that'll be coming back to the commission at a future date. Generally speaking, the wider the street, the higher the traffic volumes, the higher the speed, the greater risk for pedestrians try to get across the street. So what we're trying to do is enhance these crosswalks to make it easier for pedestrians to get across the street. What we're proposing to do excuse me, is install pedestrian activated flashing lights. That's a picture of what we're proposing. The sign on top and the sign on bottom are just standard traffic signs, and there's a thin light bar that's going to be installed right in between. The lights will pulse back and forth on either side when activated by a pedestrian push button.
Did you do this drawing?
Yes.
I wondered who did it.
Both Cabrillo and Bath Street and Cabrillo and Chapala Street, both are laid out almost identically. What we're proposing to do is utilize the existing street light on the northeast corner of the intersection and mount this assembly on either side. And as well, we would install a new pole with this assembly on either side on the south side.
So when you say, I'm sorry, just to clarify, when you say either side, you mean on both sides of the pole so that it's facing traffic in this direction and it's facing traffic in this direction even though it's across the lake?
Yes, both sides. Thank you. Yeah. On the north side, because the street light is approximately 6 to 8 feet away from the pedestrian access ramp, which is too far away for ADA requirements, we'd have to install about a 3.5 foot tall pole on which to mount the pedestrian push button to activate the lights right next to the ramp. On the south side, we could mount that push button on the new pole. So that's our proposal for the intersections of Cabrillo Bath and Cabrillo Chapala.
If you could just stay on this one for
Sure.
a minute. You mentioned here in your call out that you have a new solar panel.
Oh, yes,
and
thank
this one
you.
has no solar panel.
Yes.
Explain that, please.
When the brick crosswalks were installed a number of years ago, underneath that crosswalk there's actually conduit installed. So we're able to mount a single solar panel on the street light. It would be about a 2 foot by 2 foot square solar panel up near the top of the street light. And utilizing the conduit underneath the street, we could power both lights with that single solar panel.
And where's the battery for that solar
The battery will be in a small encasement which will be mounted on the street light pole.
Small, meaning?
2 feet by about a foot deep.
Okay, continue, please. That's just the panel, I believe. What you're showing, oh, no, you're right.
Yeah, that's very similar.
This is the
Yeah.
the solar panel, and these are the batteries, basically, or battery. If you have one in
There's
color
a-
there, that might be a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation, but
No,
I want to
please.
get a clear understanding of this, and so all the commissioners have that. And this solar panel would go at the top of the street light, so it would be up even higher?
Right. We're flexible with the height. My thought was the higher up, the more out of the line of sight it would be.
Why don't you continue with your presentation, and we'll go from there.
So that's our proposal for Cabrillo, Bath, Cabrillo, Chapala.
Great.
The other intersection that we'd like to talk about today is Cabrillo and Corona del Mar. This intersection, there is no median refuge island, so it's just a single crossing. Currently, the crosswalk is on the east leg of the intersection. However, what we would like to do is actually move that crosswalk over to the west leg of the intersection. That way we could utilize the existing street lights, so we wouldn't have to install an additional pole. We would have to install an additional pole on the north side. So there would be pedestrian activated flashing lights and a push button mounted on the streetlight pole on both sides, and as well a single pole with a push button and the flashing lights on both sides on the north side as well. We do have a couple different options for the types of poles that we can install. One would be the type of pole that we were looking at here. This is just a 15-foot aluminum spun pole painted Malaga green. Another alternative is actually we could order a traffic signal pole with the Cabrillo-style fluted base. We could special order one. They can make them up to 18 feet tall. We only need 15 feet to...
But there would be no signal light on it.
There'd be no signal light. It would just be a green pole with this assembly mounted on it and a pedestrian push button, like so. So we can, those are two options that we have available to us. As far as the pedestrian push button pole that would have to be installed at the other intersection because of the distance from the street light to the pedestrian access ramp, we have two alternatives. One is to install just a Caltrans style pole, which is just a straight metal pole. There's one on the very last page. That's a picture of, this is just a pedestrian push button pole. It can be painted Malaga green to match the other fixtures in the area. Another alternative would be to install a pole like this, cut down to about 4 feet in height and capped off. The diameter of those poles is about 6 inches, though, so proportionately, I don't know if it would be as pleasing.
Okay. Does that wrap up your presentation?
That's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the Commission? Commissioner Winnick, please.
Just on that one pole, the very last item, curious to know if they provide the fluted column bases, but with a narrower diameter pole. Like the one that you just mentioned is available 6 inches diameter. Does the same manufacturer or somebody like that?
Unfortunately, no. The fluted bases only come in two sizes, one for the 6-inch diameter pole and then one for the larger streetlight poles. So that's why one alternative would be to use the 6-inch pole and just cut it down to size.
There's no example of a photograph in this presentation of the 6-inch pole, correct?
That would be this pole here. We don't have any in the city that have been cut down. That's the second last page.
Oh, yeah. It's still pretty big.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I do have details of those base flutings if anybody would like to look at them.
Okay.
Can you explain how this is going to be mounted? I didn't quite catch how this thing is going to be mounted on. What? Is it is it separate or is it mounted on something else? This particular.
Yeah.
You're removing some that are already that are just on a kind of a post.
Right. That's a great question. If I could back up a few photographs.
I was having trouble figuring out what. I mean, what.
This is a good example right here.
So.
In years gone by, the standard practice was to install one of these pedestrian warning signs in advance of the crosswalk. The standards have changed now, and instead of installing these signs in advance, these signs are actually installed right at the crosswalk with this downward pointing arrow indicating this is where the crosswalk is. So what we would do at all these locations is remove all these advanced signs and signposts if they're mounted on an individual signpost. And then right at the intersection, we would be installing this assembly. These can either be bolted to the poles or metal rings can be installed and then painted to match the poles.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
I received a request to speak at late time here, so I'll open public comment, and first member of the public to speak is Callum DeForest.
Thank you. Callum DeForest. I would like to know what the problem seems to be is where are the flashing lights to alert the cars that people are going to be in the crosswalk. I don't see where those are. And secondly, is this going to increase the liability of the city if you press the button and the flashing lights come on and then you get hit in the crosswalk because it isn't a actual traffic light, or is the city going to be liable? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Okay, I'll bring it back to the Commission for questions. Commissioner Boucher, any questions? Commissioner Sharp, any questions? Commissioner Murray, any additional? Okay, Commissioner Arias, any?
Yes, I'd like to ask the question about the liability.
Our motivation for doing this installation is public safety.
I agree.
Like I said at the beginning, generally the wider the street, the higher the speeds, the higher the traffic volumes, the greater risk for pedestrians in the crosswalk. By taking steps to enhance these crosswalks, we are essentially looking out for the best interests of the city, but our real motivation is public safety, and if we look out for public safety, the liability tends to fall in line.
Okay. Commissioner Murray?
So this is the same size as what is existing now in the,
Yes.
the ones that are going to be removed?
Yes, they are the exact same size. The only difference in the signs are these two little lines.
Yeah. and
The style of sign has changed.
And the ones below, they're new, aren't they?
Yes.
And this bar.
Yeah.
So what color is that?
It's an amber color. It's about the same color as a yellow traffic signal, like the
I think
yellow
she means
light.
what color is the casing?
Oh,
case.
two alternatives. Comes in either black or polished metal. We probably could get it
Paint polished
specially
metal.
painted. Hadn't thought of that.
Okay. Any other questions? I had a couple questions. What size is that? Can you give me the dimensions of that flashing light?
Yeah, it's about 6 inches tall by about 2 feet wide.
And how deep?
About 6 inches.
Okay. Second question, is there any alternative to solar panels? Can you hardwire this into?
They can be hardwired. Unfortunately, we don't have a source of power close by that we could tap
But
into.
you have conduit power.
Right.
Okay.
So unfortunately, what we would need here is a meter at each location in order to bring a service in, and we'd either need a meter pedestal or solar panels.
Last question, I guess I had three. Is there any way that the battery could be mounted in one of these planters, discreetly hidden? Or is there a voltage drop in your runs, that sort of thing? Or can it be mounted in a small vault in the sidewalk?
I think so. Hadn't thought of that either. Yeah, what is it? There would still have to be a cabinet on the pole because there is a controller that drives the flashing lights. Mm-hmm. However, there's a possibility that the size of that could be reduced, and perhaps the batteries could be installed in a pole box.
It seems to me that the I'm getting into comments, but it seems to me, or could you investigate, please, the ability for the electronics of that switching to be encased in that?
Unfortunately, the controller is larger than that push button. I will have to check with our electronic maintenance staff to see whether or not they have any concerns with storing the batteries essentially underground in a flood area.
Yeah. Or if it could be, located in the landscape area. That was a comment. But anyway, get to comments or questions. Commissioner Winnick?
I have one more question.
Okay.
And it was just another strategy for doing, and I'm not trying to get into traffic engineering, but I've seen it in Goleta on Fairview Avenue, where they have a crosswalk where instead of having big lights, I mean, they may have them too, but they have lights across the crosswalk to catch the eye of the drivers. It also lets the pedestrians know where to walk, but I also find it less visually distracting, that's why I'm asking the question, than a big thing up on a thing. So I'm wondering if consideration was given to that type of solution.
Yeah, we did consider that. There's actually 3 types of pedestrian activated lights that we're permitted to use by the National Traffic Manual. One is just a pulsing amber beacon. It's a rather large light. The second is the in-pavement flashing lights that you just described, and the third is these smaller beacons. The first two studies have been done, and they don't have very good driver yielding rates. In other words, they don't get a really high percentage of drivers yielding to pedestrians utilizing those devices. With the pulsing amber beacon, can be as low as 30%. The in-pavement lights, 50 to 60%. These are in the 80 to 90% range. So effectiveness is why we're drawn to this item.
Did you have any comments, or did you have a question?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Sharp, question.
Would you tell us again the size of the beacon?
Yeah, each of these lights is about 3 inches by 7 inches. The overall bar is about 2 feet by 6 feet. 2
2 feet by
That'd be
6
awfully
feet.
deep. Yes, yes, sir.
Well, this is way out of scale for that dimension, unless it's half. This appears, there's 1 foot, and there's a 2nd foot. This appears to be...
This is about 7 inches right here.
I see what you're saying. It is sort of out of
The drawing
scale.
is out of scale. I just want to know what it's going to really look like.
Because if this is 1 foot down the middle, this would be 6 inches. This from here to here is not the same as there to there, graphically.
Okay. It may be a little larger than 2 feet.
Well, actually, you would want it to be smaller than 2
How
feet.
wide is the sign?
The sign measured on the diagonal is 30 inches. Yeah.
A little trick I learned
There
in
you
school.
go.
So your
If I had a
is
calculator.
30.
Okay, 30
And this has
inches.
got to be bigger than 6 inches then.
Yeah. These lights, the light bars also come in a smaller size. The one shown in the diagram here is 3 inches by 7 inches. There's also one that's 2 inches by 5 inches.
Okay, I think you've answered the question, yes or no? Commissioner Murray, question?
So these lights are they completely off until the pedestrian hits the button, and then they would be flashing,
Yes.
and then they would go off
Yes.
after?
Yeah, we would time them a certain amount of time, like an average pedestrian's walking speed, to get them across the street, and then the lights would go off.
How does the pedestrian know that the light has stopped flashing?
We actually don't want the pedestrian to know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If ideally what we would like to do, if poles and everything weren't an issue, we would actually mount the lights outside of the crosswalk facing out to traffic.
Right.
When the pedestrian hits the button, we want pedestrian looking at traffic and watching for traffic to stop.
Not to have a false sense of security with a timer.
Exactly.
Okay. If the light stops flashing while the pedestrian is in the crosswalk, that's a little problematic, correct? Or
Well, at that point,
hopefully the cars had been stopped already.
Yep.
Gotcha. I thought that
Pedestrians
went
well
through.
into the crosswalk.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll go to comments. Commissioner Arias, comment?
Well, I think the overriding concern that I have is that things be as least obtrusive as possible, and maintaining the same standard of architecture in the or design in the posts, I think is important, except with the ones where just have the single signal push the straight line down. I think if you go to those others, it'll be overworked.
So you're more in favor of just the single, simple pole?
Yeah, the same, because if you have to cut the others off, it's just too much.
Yeah, what?
I would like to see it combined as much as possible. I'd like to see, like Chair Suding said about the battery, either in the landscaping or in a vault. Keep it as simple as possible, because this is a very important road, and I think you're wise to recognize that pedestrians crossing all over the place, hopefully they'll stop in the middle of the street and go on, but that may not be possible. But I respect the fact that you're looking at the safety of the pedestrians, which I think is important.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Let's
Murray?
keep it simple.
Yeah. Commissioner Murray? Sorry, Commissioner Arias.
I took a long walk on State Street and down to where these are going to be, and also looked at other examples. And I certainly would be in favor of this. This is even not the aluminum, but this is what's on State Street, and then the pole this pole is also on State Street, when you know those little crosswalks where you just, they are really not obtrusive, and it really tells for people on wheelchair, it's easy for them to maneuver. So I will be certainly in favor of that. It will not be so cluttering, and it also be compatible with the base of what's over there. I'm very concerned about the size of this this part of the, because you also have this huge arrow, and I guess I'm just asking that those two items be carefully looked at to do not be so obtrusive. But I do not support the solar one, even though it's saving energy. It's just not appropriate for the historical Cabrillo Boulevard.
So what you're saying is you do not approve of the solar panels? Okay. Well, then the other option, I don't know if you understood, but the other option would be that they would have to install a meter box at each of these locations to have the utility company wire in power to them and then meter that power. So there would be an additional cabinet that would have to be in place to hold that meter. Just didn't know if you heard that part. Okay.
Yeah, I heard that part.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
I'm going down the line here. You-
I'm sorry.
I guess I see that, but I just, the solar, it's just introducing another new pole, another new style in the Cabrillo, and I'm just thinking, no matter what, the whole Cabrillo needs to look in some of it in one sense, historical sense.
Okay. Commissioner Sharp?
I think it's important that it be kept as simple as possible. If either of these can be double-sided, and I realize it can't, it would be really important to minimize whatever you can as you refine this design. I think the beacon box should be Laga green, and I'm sure you can order it that way. And I agree that the smaller, simple poles are better than trying to draw more attention to it.
Okay. Commissioner Boucher?
I agree with those comments. I was just wondering if the panel that the arrow is on, could that be reduced in size? That's a question, I'm sorry.
Can you reduce the size of the arrow sign?
Unfortunately, no. There is a standard sign size that we do have to follow. The
Okay,
sign.
that
That's fine,
answers
you
the
answered
question.
it.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Commissioner Winnick?
I was going to ask the same thing. I wanted it to be a square, the same size arrow. But anyway,
That was exactly what I thought.
yeah, because it just would look less cluttered. I'm in favor of the proposal overall. I could support it. The questions or the things I just want to clarify is on the solar panel. You had offered a couple options where it could either be on the pole or at the top of the pole. I think to maybe mitigate the problem of visual clutter, since it's already a street light there, perhaps if the solar panel was at the highest point possible, it would be less, that was one of the options you offered. So I would support that option of putting the solar panel as high as possible. I also support the idea of hiding the battery clumps as best as possible. And it seems like the bases of these lamp posts might even be big enough. I don't know. Maybe that could have been something that was studied. I just want to clarify the comments, because when I was hearing it discussed down the line, I just want to make sure we're all thinking the same thing, that we would have the fluted bases for the larger installation where the sign and the signal light is, but at the singles posts that are just for the handicap activation
Would be the smaller diameter.
is the smaller
post. Yeah,
diameter.
yeah.
Okay. And that everything would be the color, that green, I forgot the name, but including the casing for the signal itself. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll offer my comments and make it real quick. I think this is a really important and useful project. I certainly don't want to see any more pedestrians get hit, so this is very timely. I am not a huge fan of the solar little panels that I see popping up everywhere on top of poles, but I think Mr. Winnick had a decent solution that that solar panel be mounted as high as possible on any pole that's available. So if there has to be one on a 15-foot pole, maybe there's a 30-foot pole next door or somewhere close by that could be mounted on. I really don't want to see those solar panels, too close to eye level. But this is an important enough a project that if they have to be there, they have to be there. So I'll summarize the comments. The 15-foot pole is acceptable where there is no existing pole. All equipment shall be the least obtrusive as possible. Study putting the battery and the controls in ground or in the landscape. The push-button pole shall be the smaller diameter option. The beacon box shall be painted Malaga green. Mount solar panel at the highest point possible on any street light. Basically, keep your solutions simple. And I think it's fair to say that the entire commission is very appreciative of this project, and we know how important it is, so continue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion? What, for indefinite? 2 week?
Do you want 2 weeks or indefinite continuance?
2 weeks should be adequate. Thank you.
Okay. So a motion by Boucher, second by Winnick. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Your motion carries. Do you understand the motion?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. We're taking that. Have a nice happy hour. Whatever do you want? What do you want from me?
I guess ABR's going to see you for Milpas. Are you working with that as well?
Milpas, and we're also going to be looking at Colorado as well.
Yeah. This is an important element for the safety of pedestrians, so we appreciate you getting on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item number 2, and this is the 100 block of State Street. And this is a proposal for the installation of a ceramic tile plaque to commemorate the location of the Lockheed aircraft manufacturing in Santa Barbara, originally located at 101 State Street and historically known as the William L. Rust Garage. And if you could introduce yourself, welcome back, give a brief presentation, and if you could touch that large button down at the bottom. There you go. Perfect.
My name is John Fritchie. I have studied the Lockheeds for many years. I think it's very important to the history of Santa Barbara when you consider what they did and eventually bringing modern aircraft to Santa Barbara. This location, we're taking advantage of a city telephone
Nook.
alcove. It's been literally just an eyesore because the phone has been ripped out or taken out, and now you've just got a hole essentially there with a plate. The picture that is in your packet is a picture that was of a signpost down in Summerlin. There is no known color photograph of the thing, so the artist I hired took contemporary pictures of those days to get the kind of colors that women would wear and that kind of thing. The plaque wording has been, as you see in the picture, was trying to make it as compatible with the tile that still exists behind where we will be. We're coming forward. In other words, we're mounting the plaque forward.
Flush with the surface of the surround.
Yeah, it's actually on what they call a barter board, and it's a ½ an inch thick, and then you got the tile. So it's about 3/4 of an inch beyond the existing tile.
So that shows up sort of in this detail here?
Yes.
This photograph, everybody see that?
And what really happens is after we get the picture up, we have to put something around the edge, so you just don't have the batter board showing.
Okay.
Gives it a finished appearance.
Okay. And this is a sample of
the materials.
the materials. Okay. This actually would end up like that, but
Well, it's going to actually get it right over there, but, you know, it all depends how she ends up with this very close edge pieces.
something like that.
And that color was customized by the artist to match as best we could to the
And do you,
existing.
I'm sorry to, are you, go ahead, continue. I'm sorry, I'm getting anxious here.
Well, I think all this color, the wording, has been trying to expand the space so that we can move up higher for people to see and have the wording come up and have it easily read because there's no light there. So, you know,
Do you have the actual verbiage of what the plaque is going to say?
the actual verbiage is on the page before. It's this page.
Okay. So I'll read this. It says, on this site from 1916 to 1921, some of the finest airplanes in early American aviation were built. John K. Northrop, a 1919 Santa Barbara High School graduate, joined with Allen and Malcolm Lockheed, later known as Lockheed, to build the largest seaplane of its era, the 10-passenger F-1. The early planes were mostly constructed with wood and Irish linen. They also created a sleek sports plane with an aerodynamic designed laminated wooden fuselage. The concept of lamination was to forever change how planes were designed. Although they were leading innovators in the field, business success eluded them. They closed shop in Santa Barbara in 1921. This plaque was sponsored by the native sons of the Golden West, Santa Barbara Parlor number 116. Okay. If you're finished with your presentation, I'll open it up to public comment. I have Mr. Kellum DeForest. Mr. DeForest.
Kellum DeForest, I just want to commend Mr. Frisky for going through with this project. I think this plaque is badly needed and would be great. And the Lockheed and this airplane and the Santa Barbara's part in the history of aviation needs to be commemorated. And I, as a member of the Native Sons of the Golden West, I am pleased that they can sponsor this plaque. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I will now close public comment, bring it back to the Commission for questions. Commissioner Arias, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, Commissioner Murray, questions? No? Commissioner Sharp, questions?
No questions.
Boucher, questions? Commissioner Winnick, any questions? Okay. Any comments from anybody?
I think it's very good, very, very special. And I thank you for the effort.
Yeah. I'll echo that, and I think I can speak for the whole commission.
I think we all feel that way.
Yeah, congratulations, Mr. Frisky. I
respond to it all.
Mr. Fritchie, I know how to pronounce your name, but you successfully navigated this process on your own with, I'm sure, a lot of help from staff, but kudos to you for persisting and getting this on its way. I think that the commission is ready to give you final approval.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I will so move.
Second.
all right. We have a motion by Sharp, a second by Boucher. You have a final approval to go forth. And
I have to have a vote.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now you have it.
Motion carries, and this is appealable by the City Council within 10 days of this decision. Okay?
you
Congratulations, and thank you
Thank you.
very,
Well
very
done.
much.
That's wonderful.
It's important to have people
great.
like you.
Yes.
Thank you for making it so easy to approve.
Yes.
Nice presentation.
Yes, very.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is not scheduled until 3:30, so I will recess the commission until 3:20. This is the third concept review. It's a proposal to construct a 3,450 square foot, 33-foot tall, one-story non-residential building on a 22,466 square foot lot. This project is comments only. It requires an environmental assessment and development plan approval findings. The project was last reviewed on October 22nd, 2011. Commissioner Rios, you had something.
Question of
Yes.
staff, is the description correct? 33 feet, one story? 33 feet tall, one story?
That is correct. Okay. If you could introduce yourself, please, and give us a brief presentation. There you go.
Kirk Gradine, Banyan Architects, architect for the developer. And you may remember that the last time we were here, and actually there were some comments from last time. I don't know if you want to read those out or not.
I don't have them.
Okay.
But we can get them.
Okay. While we're waiting, I'll mention that the major shift that we made with this project is from the front corner, the street corner, back towards the rear corner of the lot. And the reason that we've done that, made such a major change, is that through testing that was done of the soil and reports and studies that were done, we found that the major area of more or less isolated contamination from the gas station that was here is right in this location. And so we need to locate a well here. And normally the facilities for the well can occur underground. They would all be underground with a monitoring station over in this location. But if something goes wrong, if there's a problem at some point in the cleanup process, which it will be there, that facility will be there, a clean facility for, who knows, 10, 12, could be 15 years. But if something went wrong during that time and they needed to replace it, there was some aspect that had to change or wasn't working for some reason, then they basically would have to tear up the building in order to access it. So we looked at different configurations and different possibilities, and the one we're showing today is the one that seemed to present the best profile and solution or resolution of the problem. So previously we had two access points. One was off Mission Street and one was off State Street. And one of the comments that was made is to look at eliminating one of them. Well, because this is a dual tenant commercial facility, having access points off both streets is critical to the client. So we've maintained that. But we also managed through careful site planning to increase the landscaping. That was one of the other comments that was made, is to look at ways to increase the landscaping. We've added approximately 900 square feet of additional landscaped area. And then another one of the significant comments that was made that we also addressed was the board was requesting deeper recesses at the arches along here, and even gave us a dimension. So we accommodated that dimension for all the arches facing State Street. We have eliminated the arches on the other two sides because we have 4-foot retaining along here, and then a bank that goes up, fence, and mature planting that occurs along the back side. And there will be additional planting back here. So this is really not visible to the public. There's also, as you might remember, a 6-foot-high wall that's roughly 4 or 5 feet above finished floor level here that was built by our neighbors that wraps around the building at this corner. We're putting in another little retainer. This, I think the maximum height here is 5 feet, goes to 4, 3, 2, and then disappears into a curb on this direction. And we previously also had a retaining wall along here. This really hasn't changed much, except that we set the wall back from the street here so that we could get a planter in front of the wall as well as have planting behind the wall. And then also we significantly expanded the planting area that occurs between the parking area and the street area. along with this wall, which also was previously part of the submittal, and is remaining, because essentially the grading is remaining. We are having to bring the grade up here slightly back down to existing grade at this point. So the grading quantities didn't change at all. And then we also, previously we had, because the entrance was over here, we had a stair that was kind of incorporated into this curvature at the corner. Now we've placed the stair so it's centered on the actual entrance to the building, and with some enhanced paving that will help direct pedestrians in that way. And that's essentially the elevations that...
Would you like me to read the comments before you go to the elevations? Okay. There were two public speakers, Mr. Fred Sweeney, he was concerned with the neighborhood compatibility and importance of the site as a gateway to the city and the old mission, and also Mr. Kellum DeForest, a local resident, commented on the proposed architecture design and neighborhood compatibility. The motion was actually a substitute motion. The first one failed because of a withdrawn second. So the motion was continued indefinitely with the following comments. The style of architecture with its simplicity is acceptable and compatible with El Pueblo Viejo guidelines. The proposed height is acceptable. Use different material on blind arches to further distinguish from awning surround. The arches need to be more predominant and respond to the arch. The recesses in the arches need to be restudied to obtain the proper depth, increase landscape, and reduce hardscape. And that was the comments. Those were the comments.
One other thing, we have a representative from the fire department here in case there's any further questions about the remediation facilities.
Could we turn the page, can I turn the page?
Yeah.
So I don't want to interrupt you and I make noise.
Okay, so if you want to wait until everybody gets on the same page.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. The elevation facing State Street is essentially unchanged, except for the fact that we made the recesses 3 foot deep, and also have slightly reduced the width of the building, given the dimensional constraints and exact square footage that we were required to meet. That is also true of the elevation facing Mission Street, unchanged from the previous submittal. The backyard elevation has changed significantly. We basically just have a plaster recess showing these keel arches and very little definition in that backside because, again, it will not be visible to the public. And on the south-facing side, which faces the hotel, we've kept a nice window with a grill on the upper side of the building because that will be partially visible from an angle from State Street, but essentially this is also because of its proximity to the walls and retaining along that side is not a very, it's going to be hard to see unless you climb up that bank and look at it askance. And then the trash facility, of course, changed in location. And show that. Oh, basically, yeah. So this is what it would look like from this. Actually, this is a sectional cut through it. It's a very simple CMU wall enclosure with a wood gate.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll go to public comment. I'll open public comment, and I see one slip on its way. Mr. DeForest.
Thank you, Kellum DeForest. Now that the building is being moved back away from State Street on the lot, and in front of it is going to be parking, is there any way that the cars can be shielded from the parked cars, could be shielded by a hedge or some kind of vegetation Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I will close public comment and bring it to the commission for questions. Commissioner Winnick, any questions?
The phone will be ringing. Yes, thank you. My question is I'm curious to know about maybe the visual references that you might be looking at for this. I'm seeing that there's a Moorish design, and I was wondering where the proportioning and everything is coming from, if you could share that with us.
Let's go to the elevations there.
We brought in references and photos of resource material. I don't know if those are still in the file or not. Those were brought in last time, and there was an extensive discussion on it. This is actually the third review. But essentially, we were...
Great, thank you.
Oh, there you go. I don't know if we want to go over that again.
No, but if you
yeah,
go
I mean,
ahead.
I have to apologize because I'm new to the commission and I didn't go back to the minutes. If this was for a final review, I would be abstaining, but because it's just conceptual, I'm allowed to still participate. But this is great. Thank you, Ms. Gantz, for providing these.
I'll just show these on the camera real quick, and then...
and I guess I'll just make, so my question that relates to that, and thank you for having those visual resources, is it appears to me that there's some differences in terms of the proportioning here from those. For instance, the arches appear taller in those images that I just saw. So my question is, had you considered making the arches a little bit taller? There seems to be a large amount of mass. That's a comment. That's why I'm asking that question. Above the arches.
Well, we actually the topmost point of those arches are just about 6 inches or so below the ceiling height.
Ah.
And the actual
so they're really as tall as they can go.
Yeah. The parapet is needed to block view of any rooftop equipment. And if you look on the sections, which is on the third sheet, you can see that the parapet is really not that tall at all. And actually the sectional drawing AA shows an accurate representation of where that pointed arch, the top of that pointed arch, would be in relation to the ceiling height.
You can point to it on camera there.
Yeah, so it's right there. So,
sorry, I missed it.
Can you point to it again?
Point it again? Okay, thanks.
So, there could be some little adjustment there, but there's, and of course, proportional relationships were key and are key always. And so it was a product of careful study, and so we went with what seemed best.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher, any questions? Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
I do have a couple. On sheet 1.
Hold on, let's get there.
You've shown the top of the wall at 166, which is a couple feet higher than the finished floor, but on the Mission Street elevation, you have it at the same height as the floor. I just wondered.
So, yeah,
The wall
so this is
is-
actually the floor height right here. So the wall is,
So the wall is a couple feet higher than that. Just not a not a big.
That's right. It should be drawn a little bit higher, I suppose.
It's not a big deal. I just. And I assume that you go from 160 down here, and these cars are up at that 164 level, more or less.
Well, there's 6-inch drop. But yes.
So it's 3.5 feet difference. And I'm only concerned that this driveway is fairly low compared with getting a car up and having the car be relatively flat for a 5% maximum slope here.
Yeah.
You don't want to start sloping right at the back of the driveway either. It should be gradual, so there's some grading that
There may be some adjustments here. This was,
maybe this has to be adjusted, I don't know. The architecture itself,
Questions, remember? Okay.
I could make it a question, but that's...
But it's up to you. I just want to keep it. Okay. Commissioner Murray, any questions? Commissioner Rios, any questions?
Yes. Would you refresh my mind? Is there a median strip on State Street so that cars exiting this project on State Street would be only going in one direction?
No, there is no median in this portion of State Street. Median starts
Okay.
over there.
So that is something that I would later on express concern about. Also, we had comments about landscaping. Have you considered landscaping design which will shield the cars, but at still time be low enough to show the architectural aspects of your building?
yes, yeah, we've given that careful thought. And not only do we have a wall that's roughly 3 to 3, I think at some point it gets to 3.5 feet above sidewalk level that runs the entire perimeter except where we have the driveway curb cuts. Let's say it varies between 2 to 3.5 feet for the entire perimeter. But then we also have 19-foot deep planting area at this corner, a 10.5 or 10-foot deep planter that runs this entire length and then gets broader at this corner, and then actually this is 12 if you include the 2 at the street. There's 2 feet of planting in front of the wall, and then there's a 10-foot planter behind the wall, and that runs all the way around. It stops here. The plan here is to put in a decorative bench and perhaps some kind of inlaid decorative paving inside this little, it's not really an enclosure, but it's a walled area that would just be for public or pedestrian use, and perhaps a historic plaque of some type as well. But then coming around this corner, we have a 2-foot planter in front of the wall, and then leave it, say, 8-foot planter behind the wall. So we were, that was one of the, we knew this would be an issue, and this is one of the things that we were focused on, was trying to get significant planting to shield the view of the cars from the street. So
Thank you. And the types of plantings will be designed to continue that shield?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners?
I do have one more question, Mr. Graydon, and that is on the site plan page A3.0. I'm sorry, on the site section plan pages. I was just trying to reconcile the heights. On one side, it's showing 16 foot to where the top of the glass is, which is on the section BB. On the other section above, and it's showing a 7-foot parapet plus wall above window head. On the other section, it's showing 5 feet above the ceiling height, and then it's dropping some amount. I don't think that's 2 feet if I look at it graphically on the AA section side towards the front entrance. So I'm wondering if there's, like, the reason I'm asking the question is just kind of which of these two sections, maybe they're both correct, but they seem to have a different alignment. Because the one on the lower section would imply to me that there's actually more space between the ceiling and the window head, whereas in the section AA, there's less room between the ceiling and the window head. So I'm just wondering if there's some reconciliation there.
Do you have a scale?
No.
I didn't bring mine today.
Maybe architectural, please.
Oh, you don't want an engineering scale? Yeah, I'm trying to exactly. Thank you.
I think you're. So the window heights on the elevations are shown at just below 16 feet, which is also what we're showing as a ceiling height in both sections. So I think what's happening on the lower section is that the location of the section cut wasn't through the point where the window's at its highest.
It's not at the peak.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right. Any other commissioners have questions? I have a couple of my own. You indicated that you studied putting the building on this parcel differently than what you came up with or what you're showing us now in order to avoid the monitoring well, which may cause problems in the future. How do you respond to the direction in city planning and in city development that the building be closer to the sidewalk than the parking lot, so that we don't have an expanse of asphalt from street to building, and that the building is separating the parking from the asphalt? Generally, we like to tuck the parking behind.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So.
Yes, and that is why we began with the approach that we did.
Right.
And it was only because of this unavoidable constraint that we had, regrettably, to move the building back. But I think there are significant aspects to the site design that mitigate that issue. One, the planting, which we've just mentioned. In addition to the stairway, this corner element, which provide aesthetic relief between the parking area and the pedestrian, or the street rather. Besides the enhanced paving that's occurring at the walkway, and it didn't show up on this print for some reason, and but we also have a plan to provide permeable paving for this area here, which is the lowest point of the parking area. So we'll have a decorative pattern in that entire area. But I think that really the most significant aspect to that will shield the view of the cars from the street is the wall at the perimeter and the significant planting area that is between the parking area and the street.
Okay, thank you. Comment? Oh, I just noticed the planner, Ms. Brodesson, is here. Did you have anything to add or make comments on? I apologize for skipping over you.
Oh, good afternoon, Sheriff Stephen. You guys were ahead of time, so
Okay.
I was on time. Kelly Brodesson, assistant planner. I'm the case planner assigned to this project. And
just put it a little bit closer.
What's interesting about this project is it's not categorically exempt because it's an unmitigated gas station. So we will be preparing an initial study and a negative declaration on this project. And so that's kicking in a higher level of environmental review. And because this project does not require planning commission, the HLC will be the approving body for the negative declaration. And also what's interesting about this site is that because it's so close to an impacted intersection, which is Mission and 101, and they do not get, we tried to figure out a way to work with the previous gas station, but the gas station's been gone for a significant amount of time, and they will not get traffic credits. So the combination of not getting any traffic credits and it being so close to an impacted intersection is driving the overall size of the building. So I just wanted to be here to watch and show you, see how your comments went with the revised site design and questions of it.
Thank you for being here. Another question came up, actually, when you mentioned the permeable pavers, and I'm sure you have to meet your SWIMP requirements and all that. But is it a wise idea to put permeable material over the plume, so to speak? We have somebody here that may be able to answer that question. If you do, you need to come to the microphone and introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Razak.
You're on.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Tom Razak.
Welcome.
I am with Santa Barbara County Fire Department Leaking Underground Storage Tank Fuel Tank Program, and I'm the professional geologist for that program. I also just now heard about your question about the permeable pavers. On situations like this, we prefer that there not be any type of infiltration due to the fact that we do have contaminated soil, and that any infiltration through the from the stormwater through the contaminated soil could impact groundwater, and we prefer that there be mitigation measures where it's actually discharged through a sewer system.
Okay, thank you.
Or storm drain system, actually.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Boucher.
Now that you've moved the building back, what's the distance between the back of your building and the nearest home? I assume that there's a home just behind you.
Yeah, this is a multi-residential facility there. It's
over
31 feet. Yeah.
Okay, it says so right here on the thing.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Okay. Comments then? How about starting with Commissioner Winnick? Any comments?
Although I do share the commissioner's one of the comments about having less parking lot in front of the building and pushing the building back, and I think you were sensitive to that. So I understand why it is where it is. I think overall it's a nice project. I kind of want to go through the Moorish references that we were talking about and look at the elevations. So my comments really are about the elevations, and looking at the Moorish references, it still seems to me that when there are arches like that, and there's in these reference images, and I can send them back to be on camera, is there's usually more detail on the building, which then helps give a sense of why there's the mass above the arches. So I'm a little concerned about having that much mass above the arches and not the level of detail. And I also understand you're kind of doing a reductive Moorish design, so you're not looking to have all that detail. So I guess I would still encourage having the arches as high as possible. And it seems to me that maybe if the arch at the front of the loggia is taller, it still doesn't have to be that tall for the actual fenestration at the back. I'd also ask to maybe consider that the arch on the corner, where the feature, which is sort of like a little tower structure, that perhaps those arches could be taller as well. I just would like you to study that, what the proportion is to the amount of mass over the top of the arches. And then the second question or observation I'll make is, I think the south elevation is a very nice solution on a, it's a secondary facade. It's not seen by most people, and I like its kind of quiet quality. And I'm wondering if the east elevation, so I'm talking about the ones that you wouldn't expect me to talk about, but I'm wondering if the east elevation might want to be more done in that way. For instance, like there's openings and then there's infill of the same rhythm, and I'm wondering if maybe it would be better just to have openings and not necessarily have that rhythm. Whereas I think it's successful on the west elevation because there you have a rhythm, but it relates to the openings that are there. So anyway, I just would offer that. And those are pretty much my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher? Is your microphone on?
It looks this way.
Yeah.
I was just a little concerned about this elevation here.
The east elevation?
Yeah, the east elevation on the end there. Yeah, those windows are so different from anything else on the project.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I think basically it's a nice project.
Okay. Commissioner Sharp?
Thank you. It concerns me that all of the parking is single-loaded, which necessitates a great amount of paving rather than a double-loaded parking situation. And my feeling is if the building was in here and you had double-loaded parking near where the site, the part of the site you have to leave open, that you would end up with a great more amount of landscape space. And just to take the building that was already designed and say, well, we'll just shove it back, rather than explore other possibilities, such as putting the building here, not having a curb cut necessarily out onto Mission. I think would be, there's some possibilities here that are not being explored. Also, if you're going to go Moorish, you've really got to go Moorish, and I'm not convinced that the parapet detail, I don't equate that with the Moorish influence at the corner tower. I don't think a 2-foot high parapet is going to screen the mechanical equipment adequately. And the punctuations in these walls have really got to be consistent. And as Ms. Boucher said, you know, that's not Moorish at all. But you have a chance to do something that really would be consistently, and this window grill and so forth. The Moors had deep recesses, as we talked about with the arches, because of the harsh sun. And so I'm really concerned that the project isn't going in the right direction for a couple of reasons.
Okay, Commissioner Murray.
I don't really have much to add from what has been said.
Well, there's two different things that have been said. So
Yeah.
if you could weigh in on one side or the other, I think would be helpful. And let me just boil it down. There's a concern about the amount of asphalt between the sidewalk or between the street and the building, and that the building is located too far in the back corner. The other side of the argument is that it's acceptable as is. So where do you come in on that?
Well, I was one of the people who, though I do respect the architecture and the architect's work, I just felt that the style of the architecture is not quite in keeping with that section of the way to the Mission. And so I've always been struggling with that, but I was the minority, so that doesn't it doesn't add to anything. I would agree with that comment from Commissioner Sharp of rethinking the siting of the project. But I do respect all the other comments that were made about the architecture. I remember Bill LaVoy really liked the architecture and was didn't really see a problem. And I'm not saying the architecture itself, there's anything wrong with it. It just, I'm looking at it from the point of view of the whole East Side neighborhood. And I just feel that the way it is, putting a Moorish-style architecture there, along with the parking in front, it just doesn't add to that sense of as being a gateway. So I guess I would just like to see other exploration of moving the parking lot, really rethinking of it as if you are building a Mission in this corner. It's a tough thing to do, but I have total full confidence, that the architect will reconsider everything and come up with the best solution.
Okay, Commissioner Rios.
All right. The one thing I see is if it does the building does stay in this location, I would want to see the State Street driveway being one way only, exiting out, not allowing any left-hand turns onto State Street, because that's an extremely busy street, and I think that it would increase hazard. I would like to see, I had not considered the possibility of actually relocating the building over onto the Mission side, but anything that would enhance or increase landscaping, I think would be a positive for the location. I happen to like Moorish architecture, and I think it would be unusual to have this building in this neighborhood, but we have statements of unusual buildings in other locations, and I don't find that to be unacceptable. And I think you've done a good job of capturing the flavor of it. Perhaps there could be a little bit more Moorish when I think back onto places in Granada. But I would like to hear your comments about the possibility of relocating the building over. And again, as far as I can see, with parking in the front, if it remains as its location and parks in the front, then the landscaping and the type of landscaping becomes vital because I would like to shield that parking lot from State Street. So those are my comments.
Okay. Any other comments from anybody?
Yes, can I amend my comments a little bit,
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
I don't know. I wrote them in pen, so.
Well, no, it's okay.
Okay.
I think
do it in pencil.
No, I just the idea of it being a gateway building, I guess, was Mr. Sweeney spoke about the time before, does imply, and I agree with Commissioner Sharp's point about if the building could be explored where it was on the corner, that in fact would even support the Moorish architecture and everything else. It would be more of a defining corner, more of a gateway. So I would support that. That's really the one part I wanted to amend. But thank you.
Then I will try summarizing the comments and look to somebody to make a motion. Study making the arches taller. The fenestration behind the arches can be shorter. There needs to be less mass above the arches. Study eliminating the rhythm created by the closed arches on the east elevation. The Moorish detailing needs to be enhanced. The fenestration needs to be more Moorish. The architecture needs to be exemplary, as this location is an east side and an important gateway, an upper east side and an important gateway. Study the window proportions on the east elevation, the north end. The State Street driveway may work better as an exit only. The architectural style is acceptable. The landscaping is vital. And building siding, study siting the building closer to the intersection of Mission and State.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Correction. The State Street driveway would be no left turn. It would only allow right-hand turns. That's what I said.
Okay. Did you get that? Okay, can you repeat that?
The State Street driveway would only allow a right-hand turn out of it. In other words, there would be no left-hand turns crossing State Street.
Okay. All right, does somebody want to make a motion for indefinite or 2 week?
Can I comment on the comments or not?
Sure, under discussion.
Under discussion, I just wanted to emphasize that there was considerable debate both at the first meeting and at the second meeting about the style of the architecture, and it was in both, if you look at the minutes and the comments that were made on in both cases, it was stated that a Moorish style was acceptable. Mm-hmm. And the first time, we were asked for greater simplicity. We actually had more detail on the building and more variation, and then we were asked for greater simplicity. And then last time, I mean, the sections and the heights and those window fenestrations across the front side have not changed at all. And last time there were no comments about parapet heights or proportions. It was deemed as being acceptable in its basic configuration, and it hasn't changed. So I just wanted to add that comment in. The second comment I wanted to make is in regards to the exiting, and I understand the concern, but it's my understanding that this is that this board that's outside the purview of this board to regulate turning capacities of driveways and so on. So I just question that. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
A question of that. Since we have the final decision on this project, then how would we get this information to the appropriate area so it could be done?
When it goes through its development application review, it goes through the multitude of city departments. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Brodesson, but it goes through the multitude of
Then
city
at
departments.
that point in time, we could send a message to that department that this
The
is a
transportation
recommendation that it be that way.
Yeah, so, okay. And I'm looking for somebody to make a motion for, unless you wanted us to respond to your concerns, but I think we responded to the one about State Street. And really, your comments today that you received from us was that the architectural style is acceptable. The only thing I can see in here that we said, meaning to enhance, that might have meant to enhance the detail, is that the Moorish detail needs to be enhanced. And I'm comfortable with, I guess, striking that comment because we have some pretty other strong comments. It's kind of a loose comment. Does the rest of the commission feel like we can strike that, or do you want to keep that?
About the enhancing
The comment was Moorish detailing needs to be enhanced.
I think it's accurate.
Okay, then we're going to leave the comment as is then.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
wasn't that your comment?
I believe it was Commissioner Winnick's.
So, but and I don't know if you were even on the board at the last.
I wasn't, but
yeah,
I also
so,
heard the same comment from Mr. Sharp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Mr. Sharp was opposed at the last hearing on this project, so.
So he's coming around. Well, we don't know. He hasn't voted yet.
Can I make one more comment in response to the comments?
Sure. Okay.
We did study different options for the location of the building, and not only shifting it in its current configuration back to the back corner, but also looking at this location, so at least it had a facade on State Street as well as over here. There's many issues involved, not the least of which is that there are other potential contamination points out here. This is the one that's been identified, and I'm just going to submit the letter because it does state that currently, with the testing that has been completed, that it's not clear whether there's additional contamination to the north or to the south of this point. So we, without additional information, but because the slope of the hillside and of the street is in this direction, it's likely that the contamination is going to be down on this end. There's tests up here that showed conclusively that there wasn't contamination on this end. So that's why we picked this back corner. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So
I would like to make one comment, and that is, for us to approve a commercial building set back like this with parking wrapping around the building is no different than just a typical strip center that
That's right.
we don't like and wouldn't
isn't in the
approve normally.
guidelines. Yeah.
And I personally can't approve a site plan with that solution, saying that's the only solution that we can have here. So.
We are in a conundrum because I tend to agree. I asked the initial question, why is it set back so far from the street? You answered that, and your response to me was that the landscape was significant, and it is significant. Granted, we only require a 5-foot buffer between parking lots and public way. But I still would like to see this building on the corner and not tucked back in the corner, because it
think
goes
we all would.
against what we strive for. So I don't know that I could support it either.
Can I ask another question?
Yes,
Okay,
Commissioner
so,
Winnett.
Mr. Graydon, I noticed there's a test well behind the building on the uphill side, which is right close to the building. So there's two test wells on the site, one behind it and then the one towards State Street. Would it help, because I'm wondering if maybe the commission would benefit from additional information and maybe the water quality resources, people who are monitoring this, it's a state agency, I believe, right? Is there any way that they can find out, and maybe have there been test
Yeah.
wells?
Let's conclusively identify what the issues are,
Yeah.
where those issues are, before we really make the final determination. I think that would behoove the project
Yeah.
and behoove you as
Thank
well.
you for-
And it looks like the owner wants to make a comment, or
And I really appreciate it. I'm sorry.
so if you need to come forward though. I'm sorry, yeah, and state your name for the record.
I'm Lucy Deneen, and we're the applicant, Cadence
Okay.
Capital. The owner of the project is actually ExxonMobil, but we have it under contract. I just was squirming only because I really made an effort, and Tom has made a major effort to be here at this hearing today. He is the person overseeing this. He has volumes of studies, and he can address any of those questions today. Kirk, with my interaction, we've looked multiple ways at this project, and I really respect what you guys are doing. And this is a really extraordinary experience to hear you all. But we have tried many different ways to look at this in the context of grading, the environmental concerns that are very real. So I would just really hope, from a standpoint of we've been working on this since August. If you had a question about the environmental, we have the person here who could answer those questions. It's in a remediation form, so most of the questions can be answered today. If you would give us that consideration, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can you comment on the potential extent of the contamination?
Or would it be better to continue this 2 weeks for? I mean, I know you want a decision today.
We just
Mr.
this
Chair?
because we have the fire department
Okay,
here.
okay, fine. Yeah, we have the
The next item isn't up until 4:15.
Okay, so we have
First
the
time.
expert here, so come on forward, please.
We'll ask more questions.
Again, identify yourself.
I'm Tom Razak. I'm the professional geologist for the Leak and Underground Fuel Tank Program with the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, which is the lead agency on this. You had mentioned, Commissioner, that the Regional Water Quality Control Board was a potential regulator on this, but we do have the contract, and it is us as lead agency on this.
Okay, great.
So can you give us some indication of what the contamination is in the remainder of the site?
Yes.
You have volumes of information.
I have I've got volumes.
You're a plethora of knowledge, so.
Thank you very much, sir.
Anticipate this, so.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Yep, okay. You can share.
Oh, that's a big,
Yes. So,
Actually, if we could orient it the same way that we were looking at the site, that would be helpful.
yes.
Okay. Can I please have quiet so we can give Ms. Rezick the
Okay, we've actually got 3 contamination sites at this open sites, or have had open sites at this, or 3 different releases at this site. Historically, one is this small little former used oil tank that is a very minor contamination that has been there, that has been taken care of to our satisfaction. We'll be closing that portion soon.
By the way, that's the number 4 in the back of the building.
Yeah, the T4.
Okay, thank
you
you.
see that. There was, in the historical past, I believe, the first set of tanks that were put in when this station was originally put in as a gas station, probably in the 30s or 40s. There was the tanks that I believe were in this area over here. So there is some minor contamination here, but that was taken care of. But we do have a potential for there to be some issues over there. The most issues that we have right now is going to be the release from the last tank set, which was in this area right here, and you can see that as those 3 tanks.
What
there.
does UST stand for?
Underground storage tank.
Thank you.
Right now, the groundwater flow direction at this area goes in this direction here. So we do have the regional groundwater, which is about 80 to 100 feet down, but then we also have a perch zone, which is an area that we are investigating currently, which appears to be related somehow to this underground storage tank pit. When this pit was put in, it looks like the groundwater, or the water that's infiltrated, has kind of trapped where these tanks used to be. So we do have MW6, I believe, where you see that. That is where the highest contamination in groundwater is, and that's about 20 feet down. So the latest contamination, what we're going to be doing is trying to delineate how far this groundwater plume goes out in this direction. So we do have some potential for groundwater contamination in the shallow zone in this area here, and in the soil it looks like it followed this direction going down here, going towards State Street from the tanks and where the original historical dispensers were. So it looks like it was a release going either from the tanks or from the dispensers, and contamination goes from about 40 feet, anywhere from near surface to about 40 feet down. The current configuration for remediation is going to be doing soil vapor extraction at this site, which will then remove the contaminants from the soil, and that will include having 4 vapor extraction wells, which will be kind of in this area here, with the hope that it creates a radius of influence over here. So right now, this is where our main area is that we're attacking here for the soil. In terms of how far the groundwater goes in this direction in the shallow zone, we're not sure right now.
So when will you be sure?
Yesterday, I approved a corrective action plan, work plan for assessment of that. So that we'll probably have that information. They have until late June to implement that work plan. Usually takes about 6 weeks or so for them to do the work, get the report to us, and then another 6 weeks for me to get to it. So we're looking probably end of September, sometime in the fall, before we know what the extent of contamination is in the shallow groundwater going in this direction here.
Because it seems to me that we're better off waiting for that information. And I know that that's quite a ways away. We're still in May. But this building is going to be here for a long, long time.
Yes, and that's why we
let
don't.
me just finish, sir. That if we do site it or build it in this location, then we're going to have to live with this asphalt or parking lot in front of the building, which we don't generally approve. So to wait another 5 months seems like it's a small trade-off to citing something that's going to be there for 50 years. And I apologize to the applicant that we don't have that information yet and that it sets your project back a little bit further, but you have to understand that we are looking forward many, many years after we're going to be gone.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I think it's more prudent to take a sort of cautious approach. I'm one commissioner. I don't know what the other commissioners feel. So if we could hear from them real quickly, and then we'll hear from you,
okay,
and then we'll close this.
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
Doesn't Mission Creek go under this lot?
I can answer that.
Yes,
okay,
go ahead.
There is a culvert that cuts through and goes underneath where the Arco station is, and it's about, I believe, about 20 feet down or so. I'm kind of fuzzy on the recollection, but I know there is an old culvert that was put in sometime in the past.
Well, there was a building up on Mission that fell into the creek during a heavy rain quite a few years ago. Bill Lavoie was in it when it happened, so.
That explains it.
And my understanding is that culvert comes somewhere down in this area here, and my understanding is they did encounter it when they were doing some work at the Arco station.
Okay, do commissioners agree with my evaluation or disagree?
I do.
I tend to, unless there's a way of making a determination at this time.
Yeah, but the sooner we get the determination, the better. But I mean, it behooves almost everyone, I think, to determine that before we go forward, because these are the siting of this building is a major decision.
I understand.
It is. So.
All I'll say is that
Yes.
in this area over here, we're clear over here. So if you guys want to approve it for over here, we've got no issues with it at this point. If you're going to put it over here, we do have issues, and that needs to be, we need to understand what's going on there. When we have that information, then we can tell you what our thoughts are at that point.
Could I ask a question?
Commissioner Murray?
Yeah, when you've identified the toxic part, how long does it take for it to be cleaned?
It depends.
It can take 15 years, it can take 25 years.
Yeah, well, something like this, the state has been pushing us to rapidly close sites like this, so we're probably looking at probably several years. So we would need access to this area probably for at least, on the outside, I'd say optimistically 5 to 7 years.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Rios?
I am reluctant. I understand your position, and I'm reluctant to tell the applicant to wait that long. Is there some way that we could process the building, at least get some things agreed so the applicant knows what's going to be acceptable given whatever location it's in? I'm trying to cut the baby in half. I know that.
No,
I just feel very bad about this because time is money. I personally like the architecture. I think it's going to be an outstanding building. There's some minor details that, no matter what location it is, some of the minor details could be worked out now so that.
Yeah.
And is there any way that you could get a determination faster?
The issue, I think, if we give them any direction or sort of, approval or not, is that if it does change, then we've sort of backed ourselves into a corner.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm just trying to figure out a way.
I wish there was a way that we could, work this through, but it's sound and principle planning.
I know.
We need to determine where the best place on the site is to build, and if it is to build in this corner, so be it. We'll have to live with it. But if we can get the building where it deserves to be, then it's worth the wait in my mind.
Here, here.
So I'm sorry, Mr. DeForest, public comment is closed. So I'm at a loss. I don't know what the commission would like to do. Does somebody want to float a motion? And it'd probably have to be rephrased from the previous motion and the comments.
If I could just make one more brief, very brief, super brief. We have a site that has 36% of the site covered in landscaping. We have an enormous amount of landscaping on this site and a small building compared to what potentially could be here. Just want to, and much of that is as a buffer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. Definitely. That's why I'm conflicted.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Anyone? I can't do it, so
You can't? What?
I can't make a motion.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Not supposed to.
It's been done.
It has been, but
Mr. Chair, what would the applicant like to do?
Wow. Never been asked that question. Well, I think it's a reasonable concern, and I appreciate the board's concern. And we've already gone through. I share their concern. But I don't know that even if there wasn't contamination in this area, that we could locate the building along the Mission Street facade frontage. We would be eliminating the access point, the automobile access point off that side. I don't know that we're going to get additional landscaping. I do know that we're going to have considerable planning issues because we've got a 7 or 8 foot drop along that side. I really don't see the benefit myself because of the fact that, you know, Mission Street, it is a gateway, and I can see that as cars approach the Mission State Street intersection, or they come down State Street to go up Mission, to go towards the Mission, that the aspect that the building presents is critical, it's vital. But as you're driving along Mission, you know, it's a 2-lane street. You got to be and there's no parking on either side. You got to be watching where you're driving. It's not like you're going to be looking at the building as you drive along Mission. Whereas the State Street view is much more significant and important in the way I see it. And so
How about this, Mr. Goodine?
Just in conclusion, we could wait. What was it?
September.
So that's
till September,
May, June, July, August.
to find out that yes or no there is contamination here. Let's say there is none. What's the guarantee that by shifting the building, changing the configuration, redesigning the whole thing, and doing double loading parking on this side, that we're going to have more landscaping or a better building? Who's to say we are?
It's more about the siting of the building, I think.
Right, right.
But it is a trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be a different building because the dimensional here is not the same.
And how about this? You know, there was a lot of information that was sort of presented today, and you may have not necessarily digested it at all. The applicant may not necessarily have digested it all. A 2-week continuance for them to return to discuss this a little bit more and discuss some of your findings. I don't know if that's senseless or sensible.
I would make that motion.
Okay.
Does that work for you? We have a pretty full agenda on the 23rd, so you won't get a lot of time.
But I think just to give you guys time to digest and to process and to give us some time and staff some time to digest and process too. Or do you want to do it
I just don't know if we're going to have more
indefinite?
information.
Yeah, I don't know either. But
the representative for the project is coming from out of town. She had to fly in today specifically for the meeting. And
well, how about this? How about we give you a 2-week, and if within when can they count? Within 4.
Why don't we make it
okay,
indefinite?
4-week continuance, and within 3 weeks, if you don't have any more information, or you don't feel like you want to come back to the commission, then you just cancel it.
2 or 4.
I think you should go 4.
Well, I prefer that rather than 6 months waiting.
Right.
So
I'll amend my motion to 4 months.
Okay, 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Okay, so a 4-week continuous motion was made by Commissioner Boucher. Anyone want to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but can we go back to what that motion is? I mean, it's been a little while. So.
Right. No, the motion is to, if you have additional information to present within 4 weeks, come to the commission. If you don't, then please cancel.
And what about the comments that we've shared before?
I think those should remain.
Okay, thank you.
The comments need to remain.
I mean, because actually, this isn't about, we can't make action anyway because we're
No.
waiting for an environmental assessment. So I guess, you know, to me...
We have a motion on the floor,
sorry, I'll
and
stop.
I need to...
Okay.
Oh, I had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And under discussion, what did you want to say?
No, it's okay.
Okay, I probably didn't do that correctly, but I apologize.
We're okay. We can cover it.
Okay. So do you understand the motion then? 4-week, I know, 4-week continuance, you know, get as much information, digest what we've discovered and talked about today, and then come back to us if there's something new to present. If not, then cancel yourself. Commissioner Murray is abstaining.
Okay. She has a perfect right to do that.
Did you have a question? Just real quickly.
I just was a little unsure that what you did was a continuation.
Correct.
Gave us time to bring new information.
Correct.
If we don't have new information, what's your vote on?
Your vote would be to cancel and then come back when you're ready.
Kirk would then submit at a later date
Yeah.
for a later
If
meeting.
it's the same issue, it's the same issue.
Right. And we'll have we're actually minus 3 commissioners today. So other commissioners may not feel the same way if this could go a different way. Unfortunately, that's just the makeup of these commissions. That's the inherent trait.
With us, Susan. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
What's her name?
What's her name?
Yeah, that's the whole package there. Okay.
Henry, can you grab the planner?
Ms. Brodesson. No, we keep those.
Oh, they do? I thought they were hers.
They came out of the folder, so.
Okay.
Okay.
You want?
Larger scale.
You know, the thing about
Did you bring
Moorish
3?
architecture is that it's really, really, really simple.
Is it?
And it's just all the stuff they put on the surface.
How are you, Mr. Lenny?
I'm doing very well.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to give us your name and a brief presentation, please.
My name is Henry Lenny, and
Well,
this
no,
is
it's
the
not, you know,
American...
like...
Commission,
like-
please, quiet, give.
Sorry?
Thank you.
My name is Henry Lenny, and this is the American Apparel Building at 1019 State Street. And this is a drawing. I might remind you, and there's some photographs. They're moving to a different location, and this was an opportunity to bring the project more into the Santa Barbara style. Right now, this building has had quite a history. It used to be a pawn shop. It was also
Rodenbach's.
sells jewelry, Rodenbach's, and so on. But not much of the historic nature of the original building is there anymore. So what we're proposing is completely redoing the facade altogether.
Okay. Sorry. No, I guess.
Some water in that glass.
Go ahead.
In general, increasing the storefront.
Oh, I see it right now.
Ms. Boucher, please.
Sorry.
And then putting a roof. It's not a mansard roof, it's a 4 to 12 roof that goes back significantly. And we thought that this would bring it more into conformance.
Almost anything.
The storefront at this moment is proposed to be all wrought iron or all steel. And again, I apologize for the quality of the drawings. The originals, if you will. You'd love to see that. In concept, we do need to push the storefront back 3 feet because the door needs to open out. And so that's a good thing. My personal opinion on sometimes when you create a soffit, and the problem with the soffit is that it throws you back to a contemporary design. So what we're proposing here is putting a wood header so that when you look up, you'll see 3 large beams similar to what you would see at the Casa de la Guerra in some areas. Above that, there would be a light well and some turnpost screens that would literally be fabricated on the ground and snap in place. And then you'll see the facade in the back. Now, ordinarily, here you'll see some of the details of the handle and the roof tile. Proposing on using handmade tiles and the projection out into the side with about 36 inches. At one point, we had a wall underneath, and I think Jaime brought up a good point that I completely forgotten. For a handicap, you've got to stand in front of the door. There cannot be be able to reach the door, pull the door open, and so consequently, Ray and myself thought, well, let's just make the entire thing wrought iron, and let's bring it all the way down to the ground, though would resolve the issue. In terms of colors that we're proposing, all the wood would be oiled and waxed, and try to leave it natural. We need to work with a contractor to select the kind of species that would work with that. The storefront itself, it could either be a Malaga green, or it could also we can also use a rust sort of an effect. And let me see one other thing, which is very unusual for this building. Ordinarily, when you have a door setback, we have a big issue for handicap accessibility because of the slope. In this case, originally they did something very clever. They bowed the floor, and in one of the photographs, you can see it. So when you take the center line of the door, there's only about a half an inch difference, even though it's set back 20 feet. And then everything else goes towards the ends, so that if anybody gets here, the water would just simply bow and stream out. That was a great benefit in order to be able to do that. Otherwise, we would have some issues, not on the exterior, but mainly on the interior with ramps and things of that nature. In this case, we don't have to worry about it.
Anything else? Sounds like you're...
In a nutshell, I think that is...
You don't like this nice, simple, plain building?
Okay, how about some questions? Commissioner Arias, any questions?
Nothing, no.
Commissioner Murray? TikTok? Commissioner Sharp?
Yes. Is it possible to bring the tile roof down and not have it...
Leave the ridge as is, or bring it out further, or bring everything down?
Bring it all down. This is a poured concrete, or is this frame? The structural engineer is working on that. I think it's all going to be framed. This just seems like it's way up there and doesn't nestle down in. That's fine. The only thing to remember, Don, is when you're looking at it in perspective across the street, sometimes you just see the edge and you don't see much else. But certainly, just a thought. Yes. And secondly, the light well, as you call it, has lights up in it, I assume. It's just a floodlight. We would paint this light well into a amber color, is the thought, and then select a light that would shine up into the ceiling and then just spread all over the place. It's just a special effect. And how would you prevent the birds from getting up there? Oh, if I showed it, actually, I'm amazed. It's a bird screen. So you're looking through a screen also? Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Boucher, any questions?
Yeah, I just, have you thought about where you
microphone
got... It was on.
Okay.
Have you thought about the signs?
Yes, I did, and it would be...
Just a projecting sign?
It's a projecting sign as well,
Okay.
and we will design the sign, the bracket.
Well, I know you'll do a great job. I
No,
just
we
was
don't.
wondering if they need one on facing across the street.
Commissioner Winnick, any questions?
I was just curious about the paving in the 3-foot zone. What's that proposed to be?
Brick to match the sidewalk.
Okay. Great, thank you.
I have just one question. Why are these two columns different? Does one belong to one building and the other belong
Apparently,
to
it's
yours?
very different if you look at the photographs. I have no idea. Actually, half the column belongs to this building.
So they really...
Half the column belongs to this building. I mean, we can always ask the other half permission to...
Okay. Commissioner Murray, question?
Henry, what's the thought of why the spindles up there? What's going on?
It used to be very common, and it hasn't been used for a long, long time. And in just going through some photographs that I have, and I saw samples in San Juan Capistrano and in some of the historic buildings in San Clemente, and some here. The use of the turn post was common. Also, the other option is to take the glass, bring it up, and break it up. But I just thought there needs to be something a little more interesting, I think.
There's a reason they don't use these anymore.
Birds.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just saying there's a reason. I don't know what it is.
Oh, Phil, it just probably fell out of favor one day.
Yeah. There's a
They
reason.
just don't spend
Okay,
the money, that's all.
So, comments. Commissioner Winnick?
When you spoke about color, I guess for some reason this looks like a facade that would want to be bronze to me. So that's just, not that it's made out of bronze, but that would be the color tone. I do share, based on Mr. Sharp's question, I do share his thought about perhaps the roof not being that high up, because if you look at the existing photograph, it seems to me that the proposal is actually showing the roof higher than the existing facade.
Yes, it is.
So that therefore it's then higher than the buildings adjacent to it. So I think I would support holding the roof down a bit. I like the obviously knowing that that has to balance, that you need enough space above the zone with the turned columns or turned balustrade. I like the detail of the balustrade. I think that's rather fun. And I also like the openness of the glass storefront. I think that'll be rather nice on State Street. And what a huge improvement over what's there. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Boucher, any comments?
Unfortunately, but I'm going to photograph it well. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Commissioner Sharp?
Well, other than lowering the roof down, I think it's a good proposal and have no problems with it.
Okay. Commissioner Murray?
I guess I'm just thinking the roof will sort of compete with this other, I don't know, I just feel the roof is not, it's just adding another thing there. You got one roof there and you got this here, and then to have that here, I think I'd rather see that clean opening, so. I mean, I think if you just take that and it would look fine to me.
Okay.
But I'm just.
Okay. Commissioner Rios?
No comments.
Okay. I'll add my comments. I think this is going to be a great improvement to the building. I do agree with Commissioner Murray, which is a rarity. I'm just kidding. That really the simplicity of the massing without that tile roof and the competition that you're going to get by this tile roof being more of an eyebrow and then your tile roof being lower than this tile roof, it's going to look maybe a little strange and maybe unnecessary. It'd save you a ton of money not to have to do the tile roof. I think the building is successful with the turned spindles and no tile roof. That's my personal and Commissioner Murray's personal opinion. So we're going to have to probably do a straw vote on that. How many commissioners can support the elimination of the proposed tile roof? Yes. I can. So we have support it.
Yeah.
So take the roof away.
Yes.
No, not take the roof away. There is support for removal of the roof. However, if the applicant wants to keep the roof, he needs to lower the height of it. Okay? How does that sound?
Okay, so you would, this is, yeah.
We're hoping.
Yeah. Well, it should get final. It's a very minor project. So,
Yeah.
I'm confused. So,
Okay.
are you saying if he would lower the roof, then you would all support it?
Chair Suding,
Commissioner
I
Rios?
believe you did not ask for public comment. Was there anybody who had a slip?
I think you're right. Is there any public comment?
Well, I'm the owner of the building.
You need to come forward, please. State your name for the record, and we'll go from there.
My name is Ray Mahboob. I'm the owner of the building.
Welcome.
And thank you. I can go either way. I can go without the roof. We did it more to please the committee.
Fooled you.
I do also agree with some. If you do lower it, it competes with the neighboring retail store, and it actually will look ugly.
That was good. Yeah.
It will look ugly.
It'd be better to eliminate it.
If you eliminate it, I mean, great.
Okay.
I
Then
don't
how
have
about
to-
this? How about? Oh, I'm sorry.
That'd be wonderful. It saves me money. But you know.
How about final approval with these comments? The color tone of the storefront would be best in a bronze color. Photograph the original Rodenbeck's walkway. Can somebody make?
I propose that.
Roedenbecks. Okay, so that would be the motion. Do we have somebody want to make that?
What about the roof?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Eliminate.
Eliminate the tile roof as proposed.
I'd make that motion.
Okay. Okay, we have Commissioner Reyes and Commissioner Winnick making the motion for final approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And this motion is appealable by City Council within 10 days.
And the final drawings or revised drawings to be submitted to staff.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Okay, we will keep this one since it's the colored one.
Shoot.
Yep. Okay, meeting adjourned.